All right, and we're rolling. Okay. It's Ramsey Dewey over here in Brea, California with Matt Grant and Dan Lukehart. We're at Brea Jiu-Jitsu and we're going to talk to these guys. So, if you don't know Matt Grant, multiple time world champion in Jiu-Jitsu and stuff like that. And Dan Lukehart, he is a coach I respect a great deal. I've learned a lot from this guy every time I come over here. Very different approach to Jiu-Jitsu than what I usually see, which might surprise a lot of people to hear. But anyway, let's talk to these guys. Enough from me. So, Dan, you looked like you had something to say right off the cuff.
Right off the cuff, we're doing an interview with the man, the myth, the legend, Matt made Grant. We don't need any sort of planning with this interview with Matt here because Matt can just fire away questions and we can talk. Matt is quite capable of getting me to talk for 3 hours straight just by some crazy comment that he makes.
So I was at American Nationals last weekend in Las Vegas. I came back from American Nationals and I realized I need to start doing PEDs if I need to win.
No, he doesn't. So for those that don't know me, I'm the anti-PED guy. Matt's been training with me for 10 years. And you probably, a lot of you on this channel won't know Matt. So Matt's in the Master 7 age category, which is 16 above. They're basically one step away from death in Master 7. And in Matt's division, PEDs are more of a concern, I would argue, than in the lower age categories, because there's at least youth dealing with the PEDs. When you're 25 years old, you're a clean athlete, you're going against another 25-year-old who's on performance-enhancing drugs. At least the playing field is a little bit more level. But when you get 61, 62 years old, and one guy's just injecting it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah, there's more than one guy.
It really, yes, there's more than one. We all know who they are. It becomes a legitimate health concern for the athletes. You know, Matt's just a normal guy out there. And in his age category, there's nobody else in his weight a lot of the time. So Matt will just stay for the open weights. So he's competing against bigger guys who are juiced to the gills. So that was his experience.
It's funny because nobody even denies it. Everyone, you know, they're sitting in the bullpen and they're talking about TRT doses. So I was like, so I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball. I got to catch up.
No, you don't.
So I got a question. Are performance enhancing drugs banned in IBJJF competition?
Yes. So as part of your membership in the IBJJF, when you sign your membership forms, you're signing that you can be drug tested, that they are illegal. And then when you sign up for the tournament as well, this drug tested, they're going to do that as well. So one of the biggest myths in jiu-jitsu is that jiu-jitsu doesn't test. That's a myth that's propagated by the people who use. And I think that we know who all the notorious people are, that especially competing outside the IBJJF. They'll do ADCC and professional events.
See how nice Dan is? He's not dropping any names.
Well, of course. If the camera's off.
He used to be.
We have a camera right here. The thing about me, I'm high profile enough to where I'm not super high profile, but I'm high profile enough to where if I start calling out names, then my life becomes miserable for the next week to 2 weeks. But as soon as the camera goes off, we all know who we're talking about here. So yes, that is a myth, and it's a dangerous myth. It's similar to the myth that everybo's using it. And that's a myth that's put out there by people who are using to justify their use. Everybody's using it, so
that's incredibly predominant in the sport of mixed martial arts. Every time I have a conversation, everybody says everybody in the UFC is on steroids. Everybody. So it's
steroids would be very difficult to get away with on an active roster of the UFC. They're tested so much. There are other things that you can do that are more difficult to test for. Yeah. But as far as just anabolic agents, I mean, you're going to be tested for that. And if something looks weird with your ratios, if something looks weird with your testosterone levels, they're going to put you in additional scrutiny. They're going to throw like an IRMS test on you. And that thing is going to be able to tell if you've used within windows of a year or 2 or 3 or 4, the picogram thing, if you remember, for John Jones, that was an IRMS test. For reference, I helped Lachlan, who just did a scholarship for Australian athletes. For Australian athletes, he was gifted $100,000 by an anonymous donor, and as part of that, he wanted to drug test the athletes. And so all of the Australian athletes that were residing in the United States, I was able to organize the drug testing and do the drug testing for. And if something wasn't looking right with their test, they were going to get an IRMS test. And everybody that we tested, except for one who ran from the drug test, didn't show up, not in me, from somebody else they ran. And we're not naming who that is. But by and large, all the Australian athletes that we tested were clean, at least at the moment of that test.
It was one of the criteria to receive the money, and people knew it was a criteria, so people who were juiced probably didn't apply. So that also...
Yeah, but if we knew who applied and who didn't apply. So, like, if you don't get the scholarship money, it's kind of a red flag if you don't at least go through the testing. But my point here is not to talk about my role in this or anything other than the fact that the majority of these athletes were clean athletes. And these are the ones who are, a few of them are winning at major IBJJF events and things of this nature. So that is to say that the myth that everybody's using is not true. So the justifications for use are kind of, kind of bunk.
So I want to move on.
Okay, move on from jiu-jitsu, from life,
because I competed this year in many of the major tournaments. I won the European Championships in Paris. I won Pan American Championships in Orlando. I went to Brazil. I won Brazilian Nationals. And it's amazing how many people there are competing in the Master 7, which is the 60 and over age group. A few years ago, there was nobody. And now, there's like 20 to 30 people when I go to these big tournaments, not in my own division, but overall. And I was looking to one of my teammates who's a blue belt. And in 2015, I competed in my first Master Worlds at blue belt, and there was 5 guys in the division. And then this year, actually 2022, he competed as a blue belt at Master Worlds, Masters 5, middle lightweight, same as I did, exactly the same. And there was 28 people in his division. 28. So in 8 years, it's almost multiplied by 6 times. So when you go out to these tournaments, just because you're an older athlete, there's a lot of older athletes that are training harder and working harder and showing up for tournaments. If you look at the Master 4 and Master 3, there's a lot of defending adult world champions who are still in there and training. And it seems to me that things have changed since I started, because when I started, the old crew wasn't competing anymore. They were done competing. But nowadays, it seems like people are competing throughout their careers. They're not hanging it up when they're 40 or when they diminish a little bit. I was talking to a guy, and I will drop names, a guy named Phil Dunlop, who's a really active competitor, very good guy, MMA guy. I don't know if you know him. He was in Vegas. He actually had a gym that he let people train for free because he has quite a bit of money, so he doesn't have to worry about that. And he was telling me, he says, when we were talking about, how strong everybody is in the division, and he said, well, you lose your flexibility, you lose your reflexes, he says, but you don't lose your strength. So as you get up in the division, he says, you'll see more people, and I'm sure Dan's going to have a rebuttal. You see more people that are relying on strength and physicality movement more so. I mean, Megaton told me the same thing, and Dan's going to make fun of me again because I say people's names wrong all the time. So So if I say a name and you know who I'm talking about, but I just said the name wrong. Know that I really know who the person is, and you don't have to leave a comment for Ramsey.
Gets them almost right every time.
That I said the name wrong, because I don't do it on purpose, but it just comes out that way, and it takes too long to think up the right name, so I just say whatever is the first thing on my mind.
Oh, continue. You're
So
going to get sidetracked.
My point being is Megaton was telling me, we were in a group talking at one of the tournaments, and he was saying, he's a Master 6 now. He competed at Adult Worlds.
Young buck.
The guy is his jiu-jitsu's on point, but he's even a guy like that is saying he's had to make a lot of adjustments in his jiu-jitsu because of his age. Go ahead,
so I've watched more Master 7 jiu-jitsu because of Matt and at all levels, because Matt's been with me for 10 years or whatever it's been. And one thing that I can tell you is that the more time goes on, the more that Masters Jiu-Jitsu will look more like adult Jiu-Jitsu. And what I mean by that is, let's first talk about what the stereotype style for Masters Jiu-Jitsu. You want to make a Jiu-Jitsu for Old Guys DVD or something like this, which was Matt's idea. He pitched it to John, by the way, John Danaher. Anyways, it's like half guard based. It's going to be like double underhooks based, half guard top and bottom based. But the more that I am seeing the Masters, and I'm talking Master 7 even, but this is true for all divisions, it's just going to happen sooner with the lower Masters categories, is that the distance management is going to come to be more and more prominent. So some of the guys that Matt competes against, careful here.
You're not saying any names.
No names.
Say whatever
Their jiu-jitsu is not good. I'm pretty sure that some of them couldn't even like teach a class and like show a good just a solid technique. You know, they're doing like headlocks from the top half guard, and like you're in a closed guard, they're just hugging the head. There's that.
We get a lot of old wrestlers and old judo guys.
That is true. And there's not like a single move throughout their entire tournament campaign that you'd be like, oh, we can study that. Matt's not like that. Matt has the classic old guy jiu-jitsu to where you could study your half guard game. You could study Matt's underhook half, his lapel single. You could study his double underhooks passing and things like that. But I remember one tournament, and I think it was Matt's first black belt tournament, where he was freaking panicking because the guy actually did open guard. He's like, I don't know what to do. He's actually going to do open guard. I'm like, Matt, we do it every freaking day, engaging against the daily.
I don't pay attention.
Yeah, he doesn't pay attention.
I never use it
because he's like, old guys don't need this. Just do the double underhooks, and that's going to be it. So I'm telling you right now, because I can see the trend over time, is that Masters Jiu-Jitsu will look more like adult Jiu-Jitsu. I'm not talking about next year. I'm not talking maybe 10, 15 years from now, as we get more older grapplers that have been doing it a while. Because you know just as well as I do that there's almost two classes of older Masters competitor. The guy who started when he was older, so he's 50 or whatever when he started. And then there's the guys like Megaton who've been doing it forever, and now he's Master 6. You know, Megaton has extremely solid jiu-jitsu. Megaton, even though he competed at Worlds and people thought that his opponent went light on him, no, he didn't. Megaton is really tough, and that was sincere intent in that match. It's just that sometimes the old guys have, issues with the.
You're not going to give an opening to a guy like that because you give him a chance and he's going to beat you.
Yeah, Megaton is not somebody that anybody really can take lightly, and even though he is using a master style, he's able to navigate the distance management aspect, and I think we're going to see that develop to a much higher level as more experienced people get in those higher masters categories. So that's where I think the trend is going. And since probably I would venture to guess most of the listeners are not 60 years old.
There are quite a few, though.
Oh, well, there you go.
There are quite a few older listeners to my YouTube channel. I actually think
that this is true when people will say, oh, that's just light guy adult jiu-jitsu, that's featherweight adult jiu-jitsu. But I actually think in the adult category itself, I think we're already seeing this. But
look at Victor Hugo.
Yes. Hang on. You already know my point because you're already going there.
Because he's my favorite guy.
Yeah. is that the super and ultra heavyweight adult category will look like featherweight jiu-jitsu the more that the sport evolves, and it already has. So if you're not paying attention, that with guys like Victor Hugo who are going to pull guard, and now Marigali, now that Marigali's big, like Marigali has closer, and I wouldn't say featherweight, but he has like middleweight jiu-jitsu because he was a middleweight, you know, coming up the ranks, he was middle, then middle heavy later, and then now we have big Marigali. But that's the way the sport is going. So I think these labels of old guy jiu-jitsu or big guy jiu-jitsu are just bad. They're almost self-limiting. They're putting a ceiling on your jiu-jitsu. Yes, at the end of the day, you still might be doing deep half. You still might be doing underhook half. You still might be doing lapel single on the guard end and on the passing end, the appropriate pressure passing positions. But I think if you limit yourself and say, I'm only doing these positions because I'm big or I'm old, that's really going to be a detriment to your jiu-jitsu, because you're going to find out if you're a white belt right now, you know, 10 years from now when you're competing in the black belt division, I think that it would be drastically different as the sport continues to evolve.
Yeah, Master 7 in 30 years when you get there is going to be a lot different than Master 7 is right now.
I appreciate the 30 years. That was a little generous.
Okay, 25,
Yeah.
26.
So I've got a question. I hear a lot about, you know, big guy jiu-jitsu or old man jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
etc.
This is a marketing term.
It is a marketing term, absolutely. But if you were to categorize what exactly old man jiu-jitsu is, I know what big guy jiu-jitsu is. It's sit on the other guy and squash
kind
him
of
and
the
lose
same.
your weight. Kind of the same thing.
It's definitely some overlap, but I'll let Matt take this.
We don't like to stand up because we don't have as good a balance. So we want to be on our knees.
Okay.
So mostly, I know Dan's gonna, but Dan's not an old guy. Those young guys that say age is just a number, they're young guys that are saying that.
Or on steroids.
It only counts when old guys say
age is just a number.
You know, it's like, come on, age is not a number.
Nobody
wait till you
objects,
get old.
by the way.
Wait till you get old and you feel what it feels like to be old. Yeah, but the thing is we do moves that are in our comfort zone because, you know, we don't want to lose our balance. We don't want to get sweat. You know, the matches, if you look at the scores of the Master 7 matches, they're going to be very similar to the scores of the adult matches. People are winning by an advantage. People are winning by 2 points. We're not talking about like white belt 18 to 14. You know, we're not talking about that kind of match. So in order to stay in that strategic area, we have to put ourselves in position that we just don't give up those points. So go ahead, Dan, tell me why I'm wrong.
I stopped listening when Matt said passing on the knee. So I didn't really like listen to the full thing. I just like zoned out to that whole thing. And Masters Jiu-Jitsu or big guy Jiu-Jitsu is quite a loaded term because there are several potential things on a nuance level that you could be talking about. And one of those is that you mentioned, I can't freaking get Matt off of his knees. I mean, I've been trying for 10 years. Engaging against the open guard. So I think there are many methodologies. Okay, hang on. Your methodology that you choose, like answering base questions like what is jiu-jitsu? What is my approach to the position, independent of the specific passes that you use? I think that these set your ceiling in jiu-jitsu. And when you say, I am old, so I can only be on my knees in the open guard, I think this is setting yourself up for a lower ceiling than you could have achieved otherwise. Because there are certain things that are just not as successful when the guy knows how to manage space and distance. And being on the knees against the spider guard, because you'd have to go spider, is hard de la Hiva. But even if you're put in de la Hiva and you want to go on your knees and the guy's holding your ankle, when you try and force yourself down onto the knees, you're either going to have something bad happen to you, or at very minimum, you're going to get put in the close guard.
But the cardio,
which is terrible.
The cardio factor
100%
is a factor.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And it takes a lot more cardio to play. Everyone's like, "Oh, your cardio is so good." It's like, well, I just don't move very much, you know. So it makes it look good, but it's not really that great. And that's why, back to Megaton, you know, my hero.
You can also do these things.
He wins his first match. I see him in these local opens because he still has to compete in local opens at adult division to score enough points so he can participate in world championships. So he'll go out and do these opens, and I see him, you know, I mean, maybe he's picking and choosing, you know, but I see him where he gets into a chance where he can win that first match But the second match, he struggles. And he doesn't struggle because his jiu-jitsu got worse between his first and second match. He struggles, and not because the guy is necessarily that much better.
Yeah, I don't know about this. You didn't make a claim. Yes. Now we need to go watch the videos.
Okay, well, but it's just hard for him to recuperate in that 10-minute time frame that they give him before his next match.
Maybe, but I'll bet you dollars to donuts that the guy is significantly better.
Obviously, the guy should be better because he's also won a match. He's also won a match.
Yeah.
So they both won a match. But
I mean, I'd have to take your specific claim, and we'd have to watch the actual tournament together and see if I thought that was the case, or the guy was better, because I can flesh that out pretty quickly.
I'll find one that fits my point and show it to you.
Assuming you know how to hit the play button. Matt had trouble hitting the play button this morning. He's trying to show me
I have kids and grandkids that can help
me. The slap
you.
battle between Elton and
I can have kids and grandkids that will help me with that, so I'm okay.
I had something to say and I forgot by the time you're done with it. This is a common recurrence.
That's usually what I do, is talk long enough to
remind me what you just said. What was your whole
I'm not going to tell you.
Come on.
So this is an interesting back and forth, because how you were describing like the weaknesses of being on the knees versus
okay, well, I can talk this. Let me. Okay. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to get this out before.
My wife does this.
So I agree with Matt. I remember his point now. I agree with Matt that you need to find positions to where you can come down on your knees. Like, you probably do want to come down on your knees and start to apply pressure passing, but the open guard is not the place to do that. You're just going to get wrecked, or as I said before, minimum get put in the closed guard, which you should never get put in the top closed guard. So you need to stand just to the extent of stepping over the leg, starting to pass, and then coming down on your knees so you can get in to these over-unders or half guard or whatever it is. And that's what I mean, being able to navigate like that modern context. You need to be able to navigate the open guard. And that's where I see currently some deficiencies. Some, not always, but just like maybe an overall trend, not applicable to every competitor, but the inability to navigate the open guard when they face a tough distance management type of open guard. So you're saying something that's true, but I am saying something that's true as well. It's like you do need to find these spots where you can.
But I think the difference is, as old guys, talking to all the old guys, we train with young guys. Okay, women train with men. Small guys train with big guys. Old guys train with young guys. But when we get to a tournament, women fight women. Light guys fight light guys. Old guys fight old guys. So the way we train it daily in practice is not necessarily what we're going to see when we go to a tournament.
Hang on, stop right there, so we can have a back and forth. But you still you don't want to. The arm's getting tired. You don't need the prompt Matt and I. This is okay. It's pretty early morning here when we're filming. We're just after our early morning class. And this is how our class starts every morning. It's just like 10 minutes of just Matt Grant monopolizing class. And we've just gone, no, Matt, let me tell you the way it actually is. So you should never rely on the ignorance of your opponent in a match. There's whole styles, there's whole premises of jiu-jitsu. I mentioned, like, what is your concept of jiu-jitsu? There's whole premises or concepts of jiu-jitsu that rely on your opponent's ignorance, which is a really bad approach. Because you're going to need to be aware of all the ways your opponent could be ignorant, and then they need to be ignorant. As opposed to doing something against somebody who knows that you're going to do it. And you're able to do it anyway, even though he knows it's coming. There's no ignorance factor in, like, minute positional play, for example. So you say, okay, I need to prepare for double unders because I'm just going to go right to my knees, and the other people do too. But good jiu-jitsu is managing, if you're in the gi, to manage the grips so they can't get there, to manage the space and the distance to get there. And they're just not often, but not always, excelling in that area. So it's just like you're able to beat them on a battle that isn't existing now, but that battle is there, and it will be there, and it is there sometimes, and that's when you freak out. Like the guy that did the Matrix.
But he didn't show up.
He didn't show up.
Yeah, he didn't show up. Thank God. So I went gold. My very first.
There's one guy. Matt always stalks his opponents, of course, like you all do.
Okay,
well.
you know what?
So he's looking at this guy, and this guy's like doing the matrix, underhooking the leg, inverting on it, and Matt's like, I taught the matrix and all that's related meta game for 2 weeks, probably a month before that, every day. And Matt's just like checking out. He's just like talking the whole class. Now guys don't need this. It's like you never know.
No one's inverting. Come on.
It's inverting. And then this guy he's facing in the first round. I think it was your black belt debut, right?
Yes, it was.
Thank God he no-showed. But I think Matt would have been able to do fine because Matt is pretty smart in what he knows. Like, don't let me undermining him fool you. He's actually pretty competent in jiu-jitsu and pretty tough role.
Yeah, it's I was going to say something. It was, it's anyway. So I have grandkids that compete, and I see the level of kids jiu-jitsu being much higher, but I see it going some direction that maybe I wrestled, and wrestling parents, I know there's probably some out there, so I don't want to be too rude, but are mostly idiots. When it comes, is that going to demonetize your video?
Idiots? Neither of us cuss, ever, even on camera, off camera. So idiots is pretty, whoa! Language, careful. Be sure to censor that one out.
Part of it is because of the setup of wrestling. They let everyone just go right on the edge of the mat. And they're yelling at their kids.
ADCC.
Right. They're yelling at the kids. You better not get pinned. You hope they didn't get it, or they did.
No. I interjected ADCC.
I know. I heard it.
Yeah, because that's money.
But the thing is now you see these parents break his arm, and so I have these grandkids that compete, and they win, and they lose. I mean, they're definitely above average. But they're not like top tier. But so I watch a lot of kids jiu-jitsu. My daughter, I have 4 daughters. It's funny that they would actually be interested in watching jiu-jitsu. They were very prissy growing up. But the thing is I watch a lot of kids jiu-jitsu, and you see a lot of one-trick ponies. They close guard armbar, close guard armbar, close guard armbar. But 5 years ago, when my oldest grandson was 6, those were the kids that were winning. Now that he's 11, and I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old that also compete, it's not the same. Their jiu-jitsu, the kids' jiu-jitsu is improving. And as you see the kids' jiu-jitsu improve, you're going to see the adult jiu-jitsu improve. There's a young man that trains here named Nolan Stewart, who won Pan American champions as a brown belt, came this close to winning world championships as a brown belt, came this close to losing in the semifinals. I mean, that's the way jiu-jitsu is. But the thing is you look on, Dan once said, and I thought it was very funny, is if you are a blue belt and you go to a jiu-jitsu tournament and you look at your guy's IBJJF card, they have the first picture they ever took.
They don't update it.
So they don't update it. So mine is when I was 51, is when I started jiu-jitsu. So that's 11 years ago. And Nolan's is like, he's a 10-year-old. My grandsons will be 21-year-olds competing, and their card will have a 5-year-old's picture on it.
So where this picture comes in, so for a little bit of context to help explain. It only appears on the scorekeeper's, lose the microphone. It only appears on the scorekeeper's computer. So if you're waiting for your match, and you see the match to be queued up next, their picture will come up. And while they do update your card picture, your IBJJF card, they don't update that database picture that comes up.
I don't think they update your card.
Oh,
my card's still the same.
Okay, you might be right there. So if you ever see a little child, and you're an adult, you see a little child picture, you're in for a rough go in this match. That's just the way it is.
I mean,
and there's often, in with Nolan's, it's always like this. Nolan kind of breezes through the first couple of matches, since you mentioned Nolan, and by the finals, it's 2 kids against each other. And
on the picture.
In the picture.
It's 2 grown men.
Yeah, they're grown men now.
You would not confuse them as kids now.
Yeah. So Matt segued on his own into kids jiu-jitsu. And I want to provide some context in kids jiu-jitsu, like where we are today, because I think this is super valuable. So when jiu-jitsu came to America through Rorion Gracie, at least he was the one who spread it. There's some debate on who came first. But it came with the intent of proving to adults who did other martial arts that jiu-jitsu was superior. That was his goal, as well as to get into Hollywood. But let's digress on that point. So kids came to the United States basically in the 80s. It was a little before that, but basically in the 80s as an afterthought to the adult component of it. And that was really his work all the way up until UFC 1, putting on the Gracie in Action tapes, Gracie in Action 1, Gracie in Action 2, and then you had the UFC. All that, the primary focus was adults. Oh, you do Aikido. Here, come and try Jiu-Jitsu. Hey, let's advertise our Gracie in Action inside karate and kung fu magazines. It was targeted to adults of other martial arts. So even when I started jiu-jitsu, which was 2005, kids programs had grown since then, but quite frequently you had just gyms who didn't even offer kids classes. And they'd have a few of these like preteens or teens in the class, just be like one or two. And they were always very special because it takes a pretty special kid to be able to participate in an adult class. There's a maturity and intelligence that's required.
And the size.
Yeah, and size too sometimes. So when I started, there were kids classes around for sure. It had been steadily growing. But I think typical around that time period was like, okay, we have kids classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that would be typical. When I opened this gym, I remember advertising as somewhat of a novelty. Look, we have kids classes every day. Like, that was the reason that you should join Brea Jiu-Jitsu. Look, we have kids classes every day. And further, we segregate by age.
Differentiates you from the
crowd.
The
academy that I came from, I think we had kids classes on Tuesday and Thursday, and it was all kids together. So you'd have a 4-year-old going with a 13-year-old. Talk about diverse needs in your class setting. And of course, you're just chasing around the 4-year-old, which anyways. So that was kind of like, when I opened up this place, kids in 2005, when I started jiu-jitsu, kids was kind of steadily making its mark. You had some kids classes. It was standard to offer kids classes 2 to 3 times a week. And then when I offered this one, there were a few that were on top of it that had kids classes every day. And very shortly after I opened this academy, there was an organization that started up as a just regular organization with kids in the morning, adults in the evening. It was Dream Jiu-Jitsu. And just by happenstance, they kind of figured out that there was a whole bunch more kids than there were adults. And over the course of their kind of several events that they held, they eventually phased out the adults component, and just kind of by happy accident, at the right time, the kids programs were kind of doing what I was doing. I wasn't the only one, but it was starting to change from like 2 to 3 times a week to we need to make it every day in our schedule, that there needed to be an avenue for kids only jiu-jitsu. So Dream kind of stumbled upon this just by accident when they were promoting, and then they completely went all in on the kids' themes and all that good stuff. I don't know how they get away with what they do with copyright. They kind of do like Star Wars themes, and they're totally stealing intellectual property off of like, Disney. I think it's just flying under the radar, so nobody is paying attention. It's not. So, anyways, so the development of kids-only tournaments has become like a snowball effect to where you have teams locally here that like really, really focus on their kids program and bring it to a high level. And this is not just in the United States. That's what's kind of going on here. So for reference, these tournaments sell out extremely quickly in Southern California. If you're not here, these kids only tournaments, they limit it to 700-800 competitors. I don't like going to them for a couple of different reasons, but one of the reasons is it's very difficult to get your kids signed up in time. You announce it in the class, they talk about it, they mull about competing for a week or so, and then the 3 people that signed up and the other 4 or 5 that wanted to sign up, but they can't now, and it's hard because it kind of splits your team up when you wanted your whole team to compete. But what I'm trying to convey is they are extremely popular and they're doing a lot of good things for kids. And then on the overseas aspect, you have what's going on in the UAE, where they're doing it in the school programs, and their kids only component of their tournament that they do for Worlds or whatever it is. It has, it had like 1,500 kids in just the kids component. So why I went on this long story is for perspective on just how much and how quickly kids jiu-jitsu has grown. And that's what he's kind of tapped into, because he's seen it from the last 10-year window. And I think kids jiu-jitsu is becoming a little bit more of, like, we have people that are really good at the top and people that are
not as good.
Not as good. Let's take the opposite of a positive instead of making it a negative. And I notice this in jiu-jitsu overall. So what happens in the kids, what happens in the adults, is you have almost two classes of society with not much of a middle class in the middle.
Well,
there.
my grandkids will be competing at PANS. It used to be that IBJJF only had one kids tournament a year.
Yeah, and even if you started jiu-jitsu fairly recently, you can see that they're doing all the, just recently, like the Houston kids, the whatever kids.
Next week they'll be competing at Austin kids. They did Houston. There was LA, and now there's a kids component. I mean, American Nationals had kids, so there's a kids component. IBJJF has seen it, and because the kids, there's more weight classes. Because, you can't run quick kids like adults and have every 12 pounds be a different weight class, because you're talking about too big of a discrepancy. And also kids change divisions every year. So when my grandson, two of my grandsons are competing in PANS and are 11 and 9 and are in divisions with over 30 athletes, then you're looking at that would be the equivalent of an adult division if having 200 athletes, because now you're taking one weight class, which normally would be 3 weight classes, and you're taking 1 year, which would usually be every 5 years, or actually as an adult every 10 years, and you're doing that just with 1 year, one very small weight class, and you're getting more than 30 athletes. And so that'll be that are all flying to Orlando from all over the world, to compete in this 3-day, it's basically like Master Worlds. It's a huge tournament, and it's quite a spectacle, but you can see where the kids' jiu-jitsu is going, and which leans, back to what I was saying about the card. If you're a blue belt and you see and you're 17 years old in the juvenile division, and you look at your competitor's card and he's 5 years old, that guy has black belt skills because he's been training for 12 years. And, when I say, I know you don't just get skills from training a long time. So, I know that's a little bit hyperbole, but the thing is you're talking about people who now, that white belt that started when he was 14 or 15, and now he's 17 and he's a blue belt because he gets to skip the yellow, greens, and orange. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. You can go, as soon as you're 16, you can become a blue belt. There's no more yellow, green, and orange. Is that right?
You convert to the adult belt
so
system.
You convert. So now you're looking at that. So you're looking at a guy with 2 years experience, maybe 3, which most blue belts in the master division that would have. But now you're talking about a kid with like 12 years, 13 years experience in that same belt level.
Yeah. So
let Ramsey talk.
Yeah. Okay. It's Ramsey's podcast.
Yeah. Let's put a face to this narrative. I want to talk a little bit about my experience with Nolan. So I was here like 4 years ago, and Nolan was a kid, and I think he had an orange belt, something like that.
Sounds right.
Yeah. Anyway, some maybe. Anyway, he was a kid. So I come back 4 years later, and he's a very competent black belt. And
more than competent.
More than competent, yeah. That's why I said very. There's more. Anyway, very, very competent. And I was very impressed with what he was able to do. And so my question is that, well, I actually have a couple. Yeah. So a lot of martial arts schools will use kids' classes as kind of like a I don't know, they won't really take them very seriously as martial artists or as competitors, but rather as a, yes, as a cash cow. This is how we make our money. This is how we keep the lights on. A lot of people are very vocal about that. But what we're talking about is something very different, is preparing kids for competition, taking them seriously as martial artists, taking them seriously as future competitors. So as far as Nolan goes, is he some kind of anomaly, or is this something that we could expect to see a lot more of?
That status, or is Nolan just gifted?
I mean, you don't know who Nolan is, and there's a reason, because I haven't really promoted him the way that I've kind of kept him under the radar on purpose, and there's reasons for that. Not now. Now I would like for him to get some promotion. So if you look at the medalists from World Championships for America in the adult division, which is a completely different skill level, you had Cole taking gold, you had Nolan taking silver, and then you had Mahmoud taking bronze, and I think that's it in the brown and black belt divisions.
There was more in the women.
And Nolan won the Pan Championship. I have issues with flow grappling. I don't like how they came into the sport. I thought that there was some like unethical conduct. I was previously the commentator for IBJJF Worlds, and I vowed not to ever work with them. And so, as you can imagine, my relationship has suffered. So they either out of malice or ignorance have chosen not to promote Nolan. So you've heard a lot about Cole, but you've not heard anything about Nolan. Yeah. So we're talking about somebody that I am largely aware of that you don't, unless you're like following me on Facebook or something, that you have no idea who he is, which is kind of crazy because he will win pans and he received no coverage for winning pans. It was him and Cole of any division that won pans as Americans. And yeah, so that's who we're talking about. That's the caliber. And no one has been with me since day one, right when I opened the gym, until today. So that's also a rarity, because when you see people like Cole moving from Texas, he's already good, moving from Texas with his family to go to AOJ. You see Mahmoud, who just recently joined Heath's gym. You know, it's very, yeah. Heath.
No, maybe they don't know Pedigo submission.
Of course they know Daisy Fresh. Are you kidding? They're like flow grappling knows two things. They know AOJ, and they know Heath's gym.
But Ramsey's guys are more martial arts MMA.
Yes.
They might not be as familiar with the jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
There's a very eclectic variety of people who watch my channel, man.
Cool.
So we gotta educate you.
Not to sell them short.
So I do have high hopes for Nolan. He will be a contender, a medalist contender in the black belt division. So that's kind of like who we're talking about to just kind of get that started. Now, addressing Ramsey's question of like basically how did you do this? That's basically what it amounts to.
Yeah.
There's no one way. It was let's address, was it a freak? Obviously, to get to the high level, you need to have some individual things that you bring well to the table. Nolan was just a slightly above average, you'd say. He was above average in his ability to learn, kind of like slightly above average athleticism. The only thing that was really like probably at the end of the bell curve was a sincere hatred of losing. I mean, he just does not like losing. And there's reasons for that. He doesn't even know them. I know them, but he doesn't know them. So that was kind of like what I dealt with in the beginning. Now, let's talk about kind of what you're saying, you know, cash cow. You kind of, Matt mentioned that.
I was going to say, just on the hating losing.
So
I beat Nolan when he was 14, and his dad was sitting here, and Nolan started crying. And I'm a grown man, and I was a blue belt at the time. And it's
Matt trains twice a day.
And it's the last time I beat him, by the way. I haven't beat him since he was 14, you know. And I just felt like, I felt bad. And I'm like, Nolan, I you know, he weighed 85 pounds. I don't know, maybe 100 pounds. And I weighed like 165. It's like, he wasn't going to beat me. I mean, and for him to be there just crying, I go over to his dad, Bill, and I was like, Bill, I'm so sorry. He says, don't worry about it. He'll figure it out. But he really does hate losing.
Yeah. So like even when he lost Worlds, so close of a match. It was just right there. He'd already beaten him at Alexandre at Pans, and it was kind of an easy match at Pans, to be honest with you. But you know, he's super upset afterwards, and he says it to me every time, which he didn't lose at all at brown belt. That's the only match that he lost. And he did open weights, he did everything. It's one match, and he lost without any points being scored against him, which is a super like tough loss. But he's just like, you know, I don't even like winning that much. I just hate losing. And it's always been like that since his time. So if there's anything that was outside of the bell curve, it was that. And I don't even think that's not what motivated him to get good.
But
and I'll get into that in a second. One more thing. I'll let you in. Is that I do have people in the pipeline who are, I don't want you to say names, but I have people in the pipeline who are like 12, 13, around that age, that are exceeding Nolan in every conceivable possible metric as far as like natural talent. And you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so don't please say that.
I'm not going to say. I'm going to talk about Terry Bradshaw.
Yeah, okay. So we're at very high risk from me not answering Ramsey's question, which is
okay. So just remember the question.
Here it goes.
So I have
never going to get to Ramsey's question. Ramsey wanted to know if he was at the end of a bell curve and anything, and I wanted to say that, and then I was going to say how I actually made it into an elite competitor.
Okay, so just remember that.
We're not getting back there.
We are.
No, we're not.
We're having a nuanced discussion. That's what we're doing.
The thing is, Terry Bradshaw, I sat next to Terry Bradshaw on a flight from New York to LA.
Football player?
Yes, he's a football player.
I don't follow
quarterback
football.
of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay, all right.
And he told me that the emotion of losing was a much bigger motivator than the exuberance of winning, and gave me examples. He said, "I never lost," and maybe he did lose, but he said, "I never lost a Super Bowl because I was just so paranoid about losing." So I have two daughters that swam at a very high level. One made the national team, and I would always tell people, they said, "Well, what's the difference between the two of them?" And I says, "One really likes to win, and one really hates to lose." And the one that hates to lose, I mean, really hates to lose. And so I would say, it's like if we went out and played 18 holes of golf and we sat down, to get a soda or something afterwards, the one that really likes to win would be just telling everybody about the great shot she made to save par on a hole. And the one that hates to lose would be just talking about the horrible shot she made that cost her a stroke on that hole. It's just a whole different mindset. And I don't think it can be taught. I really don't think that fear of losing or that hatred of losing can be taught. I think that is just a personality trait.
Yes, and it goes deep within the history.
And now Dan can get me back to his regular programming.
No, because I consider this a side tangent because I want to get out in front before I talk about this because this is an interesting little sub thing, is that the hatred of losing is not the only way to become a champion. There are many different chemistries, and you'll often find that there is some trauma associated with the sincere hatred of losing. I'll talk to you like there's no camera because I don't know if I'm getting the details on this exactly right. And when I have a diverse audience, I can't just talk the way that I normally would. So I'll just pretend like you guys aren't here. But I'm reminded of Dan Gable. Mm-hmm. And let me give you my take on Dan Gable. This is the Trumpet Dan take. So Dan Gable came up. Dan Gable is an Olympic gold medalist, one of the most successful collegiate wrestlers of all time, and somebody who defined the American style of wrestling. I mean, we call this a Gable grip, even in jiu-jitsu. So I remember the one that okay. No, we're not going to you're not going to get tangent on our tangent here. There's a little tangent right there. I wrestled with Gable. I know what a Gable grip is.
Inside.
All right. So he came up in a home situation which was not all that stable. And for him, when his parents were fighting, he says in many interviews that the time where his parents were together and smiling and clapping was when he was winning wrestling tournaments. So right there, that puts wrestling psychologically in a place where, like, if I do well, my parents will smile and they'll clap, they'll like each other, they're not fighting, and look at us, everybody's happy afterwards. So that's kind of like the seed of where that came from. And then there was the traumatic event with his sister, which you can see in his interviews. I don't know if he says this outright, but he clearly blames himself over the death and murder of his sister. And wrestling by that time for him was a way to control, with his parents. When he can't control the situation, look at me, I can do this wrestling thing, and look, everybody's happy. And I think that wrestling was his way to deal with the loss of his sister, like really just throwing himself in the factors that he can't control. He can't control this fact that his sister has passed away. And I think it got to the point for him when he lost, which was not very often, and this is pretty... Once
as a college wrestler, he lost.
Yeah, once as a college wrestler. It goes pretty dark, but I think to him, mentally, it was the same as his sister dying all over again. I mean, how dark is that? That's super dark, but I'm pretty convinced that that's the place that he goes when he loses. Because when he lost, the way he sees it as a young kid, his parents are going to be back to fighting, and there's the traumatic home situation, the hitting and the abuse and things like that. And I think that's the place that is being tapped into for Gable in those rare cases that he did lose. Is that worth it to be in that psychological place to become a champion? I argue no, by the way. I think you just want to be happy in life.
I agree. No is the answer.
So my kind of segue into this was that we talked about a hatred of losing. And it comes often from places that you might not have. You might come from, a pretty stable situation and might not have that type of thing. So you say it can't be taught. Well, I can make traumatic situations for you, which a lot of parents do kind of make traumatic situations for their kids. So anyways, back to our original thing, because we wanted to talk about that. So that was the trait that I had that was kind of no one came in with. If you want to say natural, I think natural is just a proxy for the came into it with this. It's not genetic, There's probably genetic influence, but it's mainly environmental. Like with Dan, it's environmental. Probably with your daughter, there's a little bit of genetics, but a lot environmental as well.
I'm saying it's all genetics. They got it from me.
Yeah, I got it from you. That's obviously environmental behavior. It's kind of like separating culture from
maybe from my wife,
genetics. Right? So there's a way to teach kids that is kind of like short-term payoff. I talked earlier about ceilings. And I think this is one of the most important things as kid instructors is you need to be teaching them in a way that has a high ceiling. I promise you everything that I did with Nolan was extremely, extremely controversial. You can't teach that to kids. So what for Nolan it is, as for all of my kids, is teaching them, I'm not just saying like in the open guard, just lead me forward into the half guard and smash, and then just do it harder when you can't do it. I'm trying to teach them some very sophisticated open guard stuff. So our game is centered around De La Riva. And that's kind of like a magnetic pull. It kind of pulls you back into this open guard distance management game. And not just De La Riva, the spiders, the hybrids, the shin on shin, the butterflies. All of this type of stuff is stuff that people would say, you can't teach that to a beginner. I teach it,
So that's the controversial part about...
Oh, absolutely. Okay. I mean...
But like kids just aren't ready for that, is what...
Yeah, kids aren't ready for that type of thing. You got to teach them... There's counter arguments that are completely logical and very well thought out. They're just wrong. They can sound very articulate, where it's like, if you teach... Let's say you do your kids' class like this. Let's say you do a 30-lesson curriculum, and it just repeats every couple of months. What's going to happen? Okay, I'll give you an example of the curriculum. Cross choke from the closed guard. There's a basic submission that you're going to learn. Arm bar from the closed guard. Not related to the... I know people think they're going to get a cross choke arm bar combination. They're not going to, from the closed guard, they're not going to do that against anybody good. And then here's a sweep. Let's learn a scissor sweep to the mount. And now the next lesson would be mount. Here's one submission. Here's the cross choke. You learned that from the close guard. Here's an armbar. Hey, you learned that from the close guard. And now let's do one mount escape. Speaking of escapes, let's learn our half guard escape. Here's the hip escape back into the close guard. And so on and so forth. And a good percentage of that stuff is not the hip escape back to the close guard. That's a good one. But a good percentage of these curriculums that I see people doing, you just don't see these movements working at the high level. And you're building in a low ceiling because in the beginning, you're teaching them how to think what's normal, what is that deep, dark corner that they don't want to get into, that they develop almost a little bit of a phobia around learning this position or that. This is very common with takedowns, for example. A lot of people have this kind of like phobia with takedowns, that as applied to other positions as well. Like, how are you impacting them in a future by what you're teaching them now? How are you teaching them to conceive jiu-jitsu? If you start from day one, jiu-jitsu is won and lost in the open guard, both passing and attacking / defending. Great. If we get closed guard, yeah, that's good too. We can do all these things from the closed guard. Most of the stuff that people learn in the closed guard is junk. As a closed guard specialist myself, it's just not going to work at the high level, which is why you don't see that many closed guard players. And they'll spend, it's not that they necessarily, some of the times they do, it's not that they necessarily teach what I consider like the stuff that's not going to scale well to a high level, which is a main point that I'll make in just a second. Skills that scale. I forget where I was going. Let me go on the skills that scale for a second. So like that open guard thing is something that scales well with increased duration in the sport. Because once you realize that your basic tripod sweep or something in the open guard, and that's like your open guard, you just do a tripod sweep or something, that does not translate to the high level. You're going to need to learn the nuanced positional play. And when you get 14 years old and those other people who have been investing in this, very sophisticated types of open guard attacks, you're never going to get to your showcasing your great mount escapes. You're never going to get, which probably aren't even that great to begin with, to be honest with you. So open guard, passing, defending, and the closer something is to the beginning of the match needs to be heightened in importance. And what I was saying, or what I was getting sidetracked on, it's the proportions in which you learn something. 80% of what you learn should be passing, or not even passing, just learning how to navigate the open guard without any passes. Just like, what is a minute positional progression? And then attacking from the bottom. That's 80%. Everything else fits into the, you can argue as back takes as well, because back takes are very important. Those are your three main areas. If you're going to pick three main areas that you want kids to get good at, or any student, it's passing, attacking from the guard, back takes, and arguably the beginning of a match. So maybe four main areas. If you emphasize these four main areas and build depth, build systems in these areas, that's what skills that scale. Not just, okay, you try your scissor sweep. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try an armbar. Oh, that didn't work. Let's do underhook half guard. Oh, that didn't work. Let's do deep half guard or something like this. I don't think I really did a great job articulating this, but back to what I said about the 30-move curriculum is they get tired of it. So you can either have an advanced class, which ends up being not all that advanced. It's actually often just like the starting point of jiu-jitsu. Or they just get bored and they quit because, 4 times through that curriculum, it's like, I've already seen this one. They've been focused on the belt. Now, this wasn't the case when I started this gym, but now you have essentially 3 belts per belt. So they're all like, their hyper focus is on the belt, and then they realize, oh, I can't compete at this level. I'm not actually that good. I got smashed at the tournament that I did that one time. This is one of the reasons why kids quit, because they don't have the skills when they realize the other people do have the skills. And yeah, so that's a little bit part of it. My main point is building skills in the kids that scale. And by teaching them, I taught Nolan everything. Back to talking about Nolan, is that I did not limit myself to a 30-move curriculum. When Worm Guard was popular, when Keenan debuted the Worm Guard, we were learning Worm Guard. And not just Nolan, all the kids were learning Worm Guard.
Okay, so this was a standard procedure for everybody.
Standard procedure for everybody. There's no phobia about losing the lapel. You're just killing phobia. You're breaking molds almost. And you'd be surprised what kids are capable of. People underestimate kids. They're actually better because they're just like a captive audience. Like if you say do 100 reps, they're going to have to do 100 reps. Not that I do that, but I'm just saying they're captive audience. Like adults are like, yeah, I don't really want to do like, this or that. Like kids have to. They're kids. Their parents drive them here. They have to get in the car and come here. And so there's that. There's keeping it interesting. Like literally the entire duration of No One's Kids program, he was learning new things almost every single class. That's what keeps it interesting. And then when you're successful with that, you can build on that success. That's one of the contributing factors, is that it didn't get stale. You're always learning something new. There's that. And that's just one thing. And the next thing is it has to be fun for the kids. You can't just get wrapped up in producing an adult black belt world champion, which is my goal. Gosh, what did I do? I just taught the most pointless class in the kids class the other day. I was just like joking around, I was just telling stories. I taught the kids how to tie their belt because they were all tying their belt wrong, which took like 15 minutes. And I make sure that every kid ties it perfectly the way that I want with every kid. And of course, there's always the kid, that kid has to tie his belt correctly too. And then I told stories about belt tying, and then I showed videos to support the belt tying. I have one student.
Dan's obsessed with belt tying. He had a student that showed up at a tournament, a purple belt. Is that what you're going to talk about just now? A purple belt at the Jiu-Jitsu World League World Championship.
We're going to get sidetracked here. I'm going to lose. But okay, don't forget that I'm just saying keep it fun for the kids and don't put pressure on them. Just remember that was my main point as Matt continues.
And the guy that he was going against, his belt was not tied correctly. And Dan said, you cannot lose to a guy who ties his belt like that.
No,
he says, I forbid you to lose.
No. I did not say I forbid you to lose. I literally meant you can't lose to him. Like, he's tying his belt wrong. Look at him. I didn't mean it like, you can't lose to this guy. Like, no self-respecting jiu-jitsu practitioner is going to lose to somebody tying his belt wrong. I wrote a parody song about white belts. It's called White Belts Are People Too.
It's a great song.
And there's a little music video that goes along. Some of the humor is dated now. Like, I look back at it and I was like, some of this humor doesn't play in 2023 as well as it did when I came out with the song. But anyways, every time I say the line, I'm a white belt, it cuts to a picture of a white belt with his belt tied in the classic white belt knot. Like the one that is just like the terrible way where you like
and
take
it's also
the
tied
under
way
one.
Too high.
Yeah, and in the picture it is. But like that knot, if you just want to say like I have no self-respect for learning how to tie my belt, no attention to detail, I'm a white belt, that's the knot you tie. And this guy tied his knot as a purple belt like this. There is absolutely no. There's no possible way that you can be good. There's a few ways that you can tie your belt. It's not only my way. There's a few acceptable ways in jiu-jitsu. And then there's certain mistakes that you make that people will judge you for. And this guy tied his belt like this. Let me tell you how this match went, okay? This match, my student was able to get the sweep. He's newer to competing. He was able to get the sweep. The guy, whatever, it was like 6-0, and he was in the bottom close guard. So my student's winning. What does the guy try and do? He tries to choke him from inside the close guard. That's what Jiu-Jitsu World League world. It's high level.
The crazy belt guy.
So this was adult. This was not masters. This is adult, and this is Jiu-Jitsu World Leagues, the worlds.
I remember Dan.
And so my point is, it's a proxy for your attention to detail of how do you tie your belt. And I mean, you're eating acai, you're wearing the nice gi, and you can't even tie your belt freaking right.
I remember Dan at a kids tournament, and they came and they said, we don't have anybody. I don't know if it was in your belt division or age division.
You're not going to tell this story right. You're not going to tell this story right.
And he said,
okay, no. Stop. You're not going to tell this story right. So my oldest son had been heckling me to compete in a jiu-jitsu tournament when he was, I think, 3 years old, to be honest with you. I do not want my kids to compete before like really 9. It's really an intense thing, like just have fun. But he'd be in here, in the academy, and he was training a lot, kind of. but I had my little kids class. I don't really teach too much in my little kids class. I teach double legs like this. Go down, grab their legs, and tackle them. 2 points. Good job. Like, that's the level of detail that they get. They're not going to be competitive against the dad that's like, all right, son, before you get your dinner, you got to do your $100. I mean, we're not going to be able to compete against that. So I know that there are kids out there that are like that. You know, they've been wrestling at 3 and, you know, now they're 5. So I keep kicking the can down the road with my son. I'm like, oh, yeah, oh, they closed the registration early. Sorry, missed that. We'll catch the next one. Next one comes around. Oh, yeah, okay, I'll sign you up, hoping that he forgets the next day because he's now 4. So I've been kicking the can down the road on this tournament. I kicked it until he was 5 years old. Like, but he was relentless. He wouldn't leave me alone about signing up for a jiu-jitsu tournament. So I sign him up for a dream jiu-jitsu tournament. I know, because I know what levels are, I know that he was not prepared to win this tournament. I know that it was pretty shaky. Like, maybe he'd be able to, like, navigate it successfully. But, okay, I just refrained myself from making a controversial statement right there. Okay.
I kind of want to hear it now.
I was going to say what's Guy's son's name?
Ace.
He's no ace. He was no ace at 5 years old, nor do I want, I would have done it a little bit more differently if it was off camera, but he wasn't ace. Okay. He wasn't Ace Mendez. So anyways, I signed him up and he was really taking it seriously. He was like running alongside of my car. He's like, Dad, he's 5. Let's go for a run alongside the car. He's running like Rocky, you know, I'm playing Rocky on the radio, you know, I'm trying to keep it fun. So anyways, the tournament day before the tournament, brackets are set and everything. I get a message from the tournament organizer, and the tournament organizer goes, Dan, I have a gray belt that doesn't have anybody in his division. Would you mind if he came in your son's division and competed against your son in the first round? And I said, it was over Messenger. So I was like, heck no. That was my first impression. Cause I want his first tournament to be at least moderately successful, maybe get a win. Cause that's very important for a 5-year-old's confidence. You know, I don't want to put him out there before he's ready, send him out lamb for slaughter and then say like, look, he resisted when he was freaking 5 to persist and all this. I want to create like at least a decent experience for him. So I tell him, I message him back. I said, let me think on it. Give me about an hour and I'll get back to you. So what I did, he gave me the name of the gym and I'd not heard of the gym, is I went on the gym's website and I click over to the kids program. And of course, like on many academies, there's a picture of the kids program. And I notice right away how many yellow belts there are. I mean, like the entire class was yellow belts. And I'm like, that's weird. Yellow belt's a high belt for kids. Like, if you're taking this seriously, that's purple belt. Like, these kids better be proficient at purple belt. And so that was the first thing that jumped out at me. Then immediately, about a quarter second later, I see that not a single one of their yellow belts had their belt tied correctly. Immediately, I kid you not, immediately, I pull up my Facebook, I message the guy and say, we're in. So I'm wagering. And this wasn't like the kid tied it wrong. It was their academy that did it. So it's not that everybody has the bozo that just ties the knot the old way, but not everybody. And certainly not all the yellow belts. So I say, we're in. And we do the match. Jackson took him down, took his back, submitted him in 45 seconds. All that, though, was based on the belt tying, because belt tying is a proxy, especially with kids, but adults too, for how seriously you take this thing. And more, it's not just on an individual level. No self-respecting instructor should let his kids go out with a bow tie on his belt. You know, you should, you know, if you're, all right, let me just tie. Even if I saw a kid that had their belt tied wrong, I'd fix it for him right before they went out to the match, you know, just to say, this is how we time they'll do it real kind of discreetly and fix the belt. That was one story I told in my pointless class. I had videos of the various stories. I showed them the music video. Look, we're just having fun. It's a Friday on a summer. We're just goofing around. Then we played some great dodgeball, and they did, you know, a closed guard cross grip system and stuff. So, like we made it back.
Yeah, we did. So that was a great story.
Like I tell stories to the kids, And I supplement it with video because I have a big old TV right here that I use.
No, it actually brought back a memory like that first time I took a Taekwondo class. That was my first martial art. The first thing I did when I got home was I practiced tying my belt like 100 times because I was so excited to wear that uniform.
Yeah.
So,
You got to get it right.
Point.
I mean, I'd never served in the armed forces, but why do various branches of the armed forces make the bed perfectly and get yelled at if they don't at the beginning of the day? You know, the justifications that people who have served give me is like just to start your day on the right foot. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think the actual idea is to establish a habit of perfection. Like, you need to establish a habit of perfection. The techniques, especially with kids, they will come in time, but this is adults too. The techniques are probably way less important than you think. And it's like, how do you conceive this thing? How do you cultivate and develop the mentalities necessary to excel at something, whether it's jiu-jitsu or whatever, at a very high level? And all this is on a literal day-to-day basis. Not even that. It's on a minute-to-minute basis. Like, everything that you do needs to be geared towards how can I push this person's ceiling higher in the three main aspects of jiu-jitsu, which are mental, technical, and strategic. Or mental, technical, and physical. Strategic is part of that too, that I'm debating bringing into a fourth category. And when you're working your belt tying and things like that, and just having fun and playing games and goofing around, you're really raising their limit a lot. Why? With the belt tying, you think no one's good because I got him to tie his belt. No, that attention to detail over the techniques as well. You know, we don't make the cross grip like this. We make it at the end of the sleeve. We don't make it with 2 fingers. We make it with 4. Kids are very bad at this type of thing. We don't grab the collar here. We grab it here. You know, these things are very important. And developing more the mentality, I can get anybody to like monkey see, monkey do it, but to actually like develop in that mentality where they want to do that, or that is their habit, it starts in everything. I'm just using belt tying, even though we do belt tying like very rarely, but like focusing on it to that extreme, is that I think a large part of it too is that you're running a marathon. You are not good at jiu-jitsu for 10 years. Sorry if you think you're good. Sometimes you can achieve like pretty good proficiency, like black belt proficiency in like 4 or 5 years, something like this, like that skill level independent of belt. But I'm talking about like winning at black belt, adult IBJJF competitions.
Or Master 7.
Or Master
default
7.
into a medal, Matt.
Master 7, champion.
So it ultimately comes back to what I was saying, is skills that scale. I talked about the technical skills that scale, but you also need to develop the mental skills that scale. And that's multifaceted. It's not just attention to detail. It's not just this. I'm just providing one example of many. There's many subcategories of like mental game. There's many subcategories of technical game. There's many subcategories of strategic game. I'll tell you, I could give my literal best information, like the strategy stuff. The strategy stuff is where I'm kind of unique and nobody else is doing. I could give you the prime information that you could pay me a lot of money for. Like I don't charge money for it. Like any top competitor, black belt that comes in, I'm giving it for free, that information. But it's worth a lot of money. I know
His wife would like him to charge.
Yeah, I'm not.
I would like to talk about a few things that you do differently than other jiu-jitsu academies.
Well, this is that's kind of part of it.
We'll get there.
If I have not taught you, I've not taught you from scratch, at least from scratch, I could tell you my best stuff and you won't be able to do it because you won't have the psychological tools to think in this manner. You just won't. And I mean, I try. There's a number of names that you probably would recognize in today's competition scene where I've given them the lectures. I've spent, an hour or two and then follow-ups constantly on Facebook Messenger after watching their match. You did this one. I told you not to do it like this. You need to do it like that. And it's the simple ideas, with the strategy stuff. Matt's heard it millions of times, but it's amazing.
Do it.
Yes, you do. Kind of. But the reason is because your fundamental base level of what jiu-jitsu is and what it isn't is not compatible with what I'm telling you. And that is the types of things that you need to optimize for over time. is that stuff that can work at the high level. You know, most of the time at the high level, you're jockeying for these little tiny battles. For example, De La Hiva. You're jockeying for just stepping over the leg. Can you step over the leg? What I taught today in today's class. Can you step over the leg, consolidate that position, and then start a guard pass where he's trying to throw the kitchen sink at you?
Top De La Hiva.
Yeah, top De La Hiva. You're trying to step over the leg. And really 2 minutes can go by, and it's like World War I trench warfare, where you gained like a couple of feet. Great. And then he drove you back, and he gained a couple of feet. Like the match existing in this neutral, jockeying for neutral positions, you need to prepare people for. You need to prepare them technically, you need to prepare them mentally, and you need to prepare them strategically for this jiu-jitsu, because this is the jiu-jitsu that matters. My sons are into baseball right now, and they're youth. So I have 11 and 9, and there's a whole bunch of junk at the rec and even travel level of baseball that just does not scale. Just lobbing it in and throwing strikes, it works well because half the team probably can't hit. But if you want to be successful, you have to throw the ball hard so they can't hit it when they actually know how to hit. Throwing the ball hard is a skill that scales in baseball. As a pitcher, at any position really, because the field gets bigger. Throwing from short to first is now like, that's really a far throw. You have to be able to throw the ball hard, much less third to first, which is insanely long. Anyways, so you get people giving them contrary information. Now that simple thing, I'm going to use an analogy because I don't want to be giving this strategic stuff away for free.
Right.
That type of thing now has consequences. It's a simple idea. You have to be able to throw the ball hard and swing the bat hard and hit the ball hard in the air. And there's other things that scale well. But there's consequences. For example, if you start throwing the ball hard, now you need to start worrying about your arm health. Mm-hmm. Because throwing the ball hard, you cannot throw the ball hard all day. You need to start to manage your workload. Yeah, you need to start to really actually warm up. You need to take a warm up very seriously on J bands and other ways to get that body ready to throw hard. You need to start managing your rest cycles, both on a day-to-day level, on a week-to-week level. So you have an easy week, you have a hard week, then an easy week, and such and such. And there's different, it feels differently. The mechanics of throwing the ball are different when you try and throw it hard. There's no balance point. Your body needs to get going explosively. And like in Little League, there's people, don't go so fast so you can like target it better. That skill doesn't scale. Find your balance when you're pitching. That's kind of like a meme in baseball, like the balance point meme. It's just something that people repeat nonstop. But my point here is a simple premise has downstream consequences which influence everything that you need to do. And it's very important as an instructor that you know what the skills are that scale, and then make your 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old be prepared for those. Set the ideals, slowly work for it. Try to not make a 12-year-old world champion, because there is no such a thing in jiu-jitsu. You try and make a 23-year-old world champion. And the pacing through all this is very different. You have the ideal correct. You have the vision of what this jiu-jitsu is going to look like long term. And then you work slowly, not quickly, to achieve that vision on that scale. You make sure that you manage their emotional state. Like if I have somebody compete a whole bunch in the beginning, and a whole bunch, I mean, you can compete every weekend if you wanted to here. You're going to burn out. You're going to lose close matches. It's going to be, big letdowns. You put on the brakes a little bit. Compete 2 times a year. It's fine to compete 2 times a year. By the time that you're 16, 17, you started when you're 8, you'll still feel fresh. You'll still feel like it's a big thing coming up. It's not a grind of the competition. All of this plays a part. And I think there's a real talent in sensing when to push, when to withdraw, when to say buckle down and learn this. I think there's a talent for pacing things. I think pacing people miss all the time. They want it now, now, now. Parents want it now, now, now. Coaches want it now, now, now. They want the results now.
I think the problem is
I talk way too much.
Is that you'll see it in swimming, and everyone wants their 10-year-old or their 12-year-old to win the Junior Olympics. and to achieve these levels. The problem is one of my daughters is a college swim coach at Brigham Young University. Okay. And so the thing is they don't give scholarships to 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds. It's a long, you got to play the long game. You got to play the long game.
Can I interrupt?
I just think it's difficult for parents.
You're gonna move past it.
I think it's difficult for parents to play the long game. I think parents want that immediate satisfaction that their kid won as an 8-year-old.
So there are people that think they're optimizing for the long game, but they're actually not giving them the skills. They're just sucking now, and they continue to suck. Like there is that. And that is more common than you might imagine. They're like, we're playing the long game. We're not pushing hard. And they just end up sucking. So that is an important point there. Now, another important point is there's optimizing for the individual, and then there's optimizing for me as an academy. If I want to make a world champion, the easiest thing to do would be to go into other sports, try and bring those elite athletes. Say my son plays baseball, use those contacts, the ones that are just like, they look like just
better.
Yeah, they're just better. They have the coordination. You try and bring those people into jiu-jitsu. And then I would try and train those 20 kids as hard as I possibly could. And in a Darwinistic sense, I would get 1 or 2 at the end of that sequence that would be very good. They would have been that 13-year-old who would have been the standout. That's what I call like optimizing for like the whole academy. You don't care that the other people, you burned them out, and they hate their parents, they hate you, they hate the sport and all that stuff, which is the case for most of those kids. But at the end of the day, your academy will have 1 to 3 really top competitors if you have enough kids just doing that. So what I'm talking about is optimizing for the individual. If you care about this person right here, you care about this person right in front of you, and you don't have the luxury of doing a Darwinistic thing against them, you need to pace them. But that pacing needs to be intelligent. And I can't tell you how many instructors that I think don't know what good is. I think there are a lot that do. I don't want to position myself as like the only one that knows.
Explain what you mean by good. Are you talking about good jiu-jitsu?
No, I'm talking about winning at the black belt adult level.
Oh, you think that
there's a whole different level of jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Winning at black belt adult in the most competitive divisions, which is like feather, light, middleweight, those premier divisions of jiu-jitsu where there's a zillion people, the talent level is extremely high. I don't think that as many people know exactly what types of things they need to be doing from a young age to be good. Now, as our sport continues to grow, I'm actually in agreement with what you said. But you're going to see in other domains, you see it. 13 years old, you see people able to hang with the best adults of their given domain. You say, let me give you a few examples. Magnus Carlsen, grandmaster, around 13 years old, and not the world's best chess player at 13 years old, but he's able to hang with the top grandmasters. Let me give you another example. Felix Mendelssohn, when he's writing his first symphonies, how old? 12. 13 years old. And they're listened to and performed even to this day.
Didn't Michael Phelps make his first Olympics at 14?
You're the swim guy.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And physically.
Yeah, and this, you might say, oh, Dan, that's just music and chess. Those aren't physical things. I am telling you.
Swimming's physical.
I am telling you this will happen.
They're competitive things.
In jiu-jitsu. And I'm not saying that they'll give the instructor a hard time or the top student. I'm saying they will give world-class adult black belts a tough time. Maybe coming short at the end, but that's where you're going to see the sport going. And I developed a tournament many years ago with this. Like, that was my entire premise of the tournament. For those that don't remember, it was under my jujitsu.net banner, which I'm not doing anymore. But it was a tournament that was open to any weight, any belt, any age. And I knew the juveniles that I wanted to invite to this. And if you look at the names of those kids that I had at the tournament, I had a bracket of 16, I had 8 kids, and I had 8 adults. And that's what it was. It was Attack of the Kids. So if you look, you have Samuel Nagai.
World champion.
world champion black belt. And he wasn't that young. I think he was 15. You had Mika. Mika was the star of the show. Mika was
world champion before he got popped for PED.
He was 13 years old at that tournament. You had others that...
Was Pato there?
Pato did some when he was young, but...
Tallis was there.
Tallis was there. I think Pato... Towson was another one that went
world champion.
As a child, went against adults, and that's how you got introduced to Towson, by the way. A little meow. So I already knew that this is out there, to where they're not just giving like your tough purple belt a hard time. They're giving world-class black belts a hard time. And Mika was the ultimate example of that, because
now they didn't fight world-class black belts in that tournament,
but
they did fight black belts.
And almost, you watch the tournament again, almost all of the juveniles made it out of the first round against the adult higher belts. And you know what? When I was organizing that tournament, there was one black belt that signed up. No, in that division, in that weight category, there was one black belt. And I considered it a favor to the juvenile to give him the black belt. It was not the opposite. I think most people would think of it as the opposite, where it's, oh, you gave me the black belt. Oh, you got the tough draw. No, I gave Tallis the black belt.
I remember.
Even though I really wanted to give Mika the black belt. I really wanted to give Mika the black belt because I knew how good Mika was, because I had seen Mika rolling and all that good stuff. And I knew Mika would torch whoever I threw in front of us.
Was Kynan in that tournament too?
Yes, Kynan was in that tournament. Kynan I paired against me. I had one self-taught white belt that joined, and I gave him to Kynan. I'm a bad man. Right. Gave him to Kynan in the first round.
Kynan was very, very nice.
Kynan wasn't prepared to be nice. I took Kynan aside. I said, Kynan, I'm not sure if this guy's all there. There's going to be a lot of people judging you. Because I have a relationship with Kynan.
Don't beat him up.
I picked up Kynan fresh off the boat. He lived here for a little bit.
Should be FOP, fresh off the plane.
Fresh off the plane. All these Brazilians, by the way, at least in that era, they would just fly into LAX and have no other plan. There was no plan with all these guys. With like Hishar I picked up at like 3 a.m. one evening. He had no plan of where to go or anything like that. It's crazy. Talk about not the American way. They just kind of improvise their way through situations, and that's how they do jiu-jitsu too. Like, can't separate out the personality from the jiu-jitsu. It's one and the same. But back to the tournament. I put Mika with a brown belt that had competed. Because I knew what people would say. I knew Mika would win. And I knew people would say, oh, but he hasn't competed or whatnot. He was a competitor. He had won some BJJ tournaments and, earned some medals. And of course, people still said that. But Mika won in about a minute by submission. And who did Mika lose to? You remember?
I don't remember.
Mika lost to Samuel Nagai.
Oh.
Yeah. Because Nagai was older. So Nagai's older than
He's like a 15-year-old against a 13-year-old. Yeah.
So, anyways, this is all to say that you're going to see the highest level of the sport. When our sport starts to mature even more, you're going to see more Mikas. You're going to see more of them. And it's not going to be like a shooting star. It's not going to be so rare. You're going to be so used to it. There's going to be a new 13-year-old every year or two that's going to be achieving at that high level. Now, they probably will go on to become elite in the sport. Because in the case of like somebody like Mika and Baby Shark, Baby Shark was in the tournament too. Baby Shark, yeah, Baby Shark was in the tournament. When they were very, very young, but Baby Shark was like a baby. Mika was like pretty filled out. Baby Shark was a lot smaller than Mika at that time, and still is, but he was even more so. He wasn't that kind of elite athlete yet, even though he was very, very good. So anyways, in the case of somebody like Mika and Taliesin and others, they come from like social structures where it's easier for them to focus on that one thing because they only have that one thing. Like I don't know Mika's story in detail, but like just in a general sense, you're from some like little village suburb of Manaus there's literally no opportunities. In the case of many of these kids, they have deceased parents. They don't go to school. And somehow they found their way to Sao Paulo. And then from Sao Paulo made enough contacts and paperwork and all that to come to the United States. That's a very common path. Manaus and Manaus suburbs to Sao Paulo, sometimes Rio, but most of the time Sao Paulo. And then they get a base and a structure. They're already good by the time they get there and then come here. But that's the only thing. There's nothing else. It's kind of like how the Dominicans, using my baseball analogy, the Dominicans need to make it to the MLB so they can literally feed their family at home. That's a different level of thing than your viewership is going to have. And for Americans, I'm trying to uplift the American art is going to have. So there is going to be those people who really excel at 13. You're like, incorrectly, you're like, don't try and make them a 13-year-old champion because those people will quit. No, not all of them will. And that is a valid path. Most likely it won't be you. Most likely you're going to burn out. But it is a valid path to become elite and make them what's his face? Maybe not mention the name, but there's a few AOJ kids, that are hanging around, the world champions, and they're pegged for it. But those are Brazilian kids. They're not American kids.
They are.
And Americans need to do it a little differently. And I think I do it pretty well.
Look at Tynan. When did he come over? When he was like 11?
No, 12? Tynan came over older, I think.
No, they did.
You know more than me.
Yeah,
so.
Tynan came over young. A lot, and they basically moved here to just do jiu-jitsu, and they're doing it 4 or 5 times
in
a
the
day.
American way would be the parents seeking out the best instructor, moving the whole family here. It's a little different from what kids like Tynan do.
You're right.
Yeah, it's a little different dynamic entirely.
And Tynan, I love that guy.
So what my goal is, and this is a pretty big goal, but I hope to have Nolan achieve at least a medal at World Championships by maybe 25 or something like that. If not winning, I would hope that he would win. That's what I've designed it for, but that's very, very hard. And there's an element of luck. There's an element of
if you're good enough to get a medal, you're probably good enough to win.
Absolutely. In most cases, not always in some divisions.
Always, but
in those competitive divisions, yes. So I hope to do that, and then I hope to do it again, just to show
with another student.
Yeah, with another student. That way you can say, okay, it's not just you got lucky with this guy, you fell into your lap. And I think I can do it again.
Basically to show the system works. If you teach jiu-jitsu better, you will get better results.
Yeah, what is better, Everybody's going to debate that. I promise if we get into the nitty-gritty of what I'm doing in my classes, that it would have a lot of issues online. Because I'm breaking all conventions. Yeah. I once did what I consider modern art on my channel. I forget what channel, if it was on Facebook or if it was on the YouTube. But I took a brand new white belt that just signed up. I was like, okay, do this, I'll give you a gi or something. And I filmed him me teaching him a berimbolo on his first day. Just as a modern art project, and I think I did it with Steve-O too.
I thought you got
Steve-O's like a master 6.
I thought you got that guy from the taco place next door.
No, I would if I could get a taco place guy in next door, because there's so much you shouldn't do that. It's not the right thing to do for this development. I mean, berimbolo has been the focal point of a lot of.
It's me.
That's okay. Who needs to be going home to family? Berimbolo has been the focal point of a lot of what's wrong with jiu-jitsu, especially 2012, 13, 14. If you were doing jiu-jitsu in that era, it was you can't. The more progressive ones would be berimbolo's fine. Maybe once you get to the purple belt. That was what the progressive people were saying. And then the Mendez brothers came with their academy and said, no, we're not doing all that traditional jiu-jitsu. We're just skipping all of that. We're going to teach the stuff that works. Yeah, that you want to know why their academy is doing pretty good? Because ask somebody that trains at AOJJ how many times that they've gone over a half guard, just as a position. I would venture to guess, I don't train at AOJJ, but I would venture to guess that the answer would be close to never, because they believe in distance management and the moves that work at the high level. The stuff that they are teaching is the stuff that works at the high level. And they're not going to apologize for it.
No, and that's what their kids are doing at the tournaments.
Exactly. Yep. And if you're not doing that, you're going to get killed. If you're not able to navigate in that domain, you will get killed, and it will be quick, and you'll be on the Instagram highlight reel of somebody. And if that's what you want, If that's what you want in your jiu-jitsu, okay. At least you made the popular Instagram reel just on the butt end of it. Yes, everything that I do, everything will be like, you can't teach that to children.
Yeah.
I'll teach heel hooks to kids. I don't care. Yeah, I'll teach heel hooks. I'll teach bear and bull.
I made a video
I'll
about
teach
that.
worm.
It was very controversial.
I'll teach all lapel. I'll teach micro strategy. I'll teach everything. And you know what? Some of those kids aren't going to get it. They'll be able to regurgitate it. They'll be able to perform whatever I'm teaching. But most of those kids aren't going to go to the high level. So what are you offering those kids? You're offering them a place where they can feel like they're good at something. So that's important. Making a kid feel like they're good at something is so important for building their self-esteem. So if you're asking like secrets, it's mostly non-jiu-jitsu secrets. It's mostly like things like that, like building a kid's self-esteem. And certainly like, not do your armbar or something before you get dinner. You got to do your 100. That's not going to build self-esteem. Nor is most of the stuff that kids, parents, and sometimes coaches do with the best intents, which actually kind of tear down their self-esteem. In baseball, I want to keep my baseball analogy. You get this. Choke up, son! Choke up! Why did you swing at that one? You're supposed to not swing when they're too high. And then the kid like doesn't swing at the strike. Well, you're supposed to swing for that one. No, don't choke up that much. No. Elbow up now. Like that, all that stuff is just like destroying a kid's self-esteem.
Error correction it's a terrible form of coaching like that.
Yeah, patience is so important because you have to have patience for a lot of things, and one of the things is patience for them to do it wrong.
Yeah,
and yeah, there's a whole bunch that's wrapped into it. It would be impossible if you want to bring your camera and film me teaching a kids class. It would probably not look like a kids class that you've seen. Probably it'd probably be more goofy. I'd probably not tell as many stories because you'd be filming. Probably, it'd be a little different if there was somebody filming just because somebody's filming. But you'd probably see that there are things in there that I just do differently. And basically it's creating an environment where the skills scale and where the kids have fun, where I'm not pressuring them. And no one was obviously very, very good by 14. The crying 14-year-old that lost to Matt Graham. But I did not promote him because I didn't want him to feel that weight of that expectation. There are people that dealt with that weight and ultimately ended up successful. The Ruotolo brothers are the first child jiu-jitsu stars, and they dealt with the weight very well. But if you read some of the stuff that I read about children online, the scrutinizing, like that's not healthy for somebody's ego. When you're 14 years old, you're getting social media and you're going to be reading those things. That's really bad. Oh no, he's not all this. You read about the sleepovers gone wrong. You read about the parents fighting each other in class and the split. And then the Ruotolo brothers need to come out and give a very eloquent and well-rehearsed video on why they moved to the different gyms. Like that's all like psychological pressure that you're putting on a kid. And then I've seen the psychological pressure go bad. The case in point would be like, in my opinion, should I say names? Yeah. It's not a child. It's an adult.
Say it.
Mason. So Mason.
I don't know who Mason is.
Mason Monseve. There's a good chance that this stuff comes back to me and people say, Dan, that's not the way it is. But I'm going to give you the story the way that I see the story, which is the Mendez brothers opened their gym. When was it? 2011, 12, something like this? 12. I think it's 12, right? 12. Yes. 2012.
We can ask Felipe. He would know.
Zing! No, you guys catch that? Oh, man. So they opened up right next door to another
gym. Just go on with your
right
story.
On top
just
of
go
it.
on with your
and
story.
Felipe is instructor.
Before we go on, there's so many names being dropped I don't recognize. I
Felipe
did a
Fologan. Did I say it right? Felipe,
like a long time ago. And there was some name dropping. My guest did quite a bit of this. And then my phone just started lighting up that night with all these messages like, that was incorrect. How could you say that? And I was like,
yeah,
whoa. So,
everything I say, I have to pretend like there's no camera because like everything I say, people who I'm talking about are going to take issue with it. I just thought of something. Yeah. This is a random sidetrack.
Okay.
Because you talk about name dropping and then not recognizing it and all this. One of the things that I did for, a good month or two, and then I dropped it with Nolan, was we did quizzes on who the grapplers were. So I'd show a picture of Andre Galvao, and then the kids would have to name it. And then over time, Andre, Haja, Shanji, all the people that were like legends at that time. They're still legends. But then they start to get to know all the people. And there's a point to it. Because I was kind of thinking that baseball training baseball card collecting, you know, back in its heyday, like in the 60s and 70s, how that was like, yeah, you got to know their stats and everything. So I go over the grappler, I teach one move in their style, and know their accomplishments, and the kids would have to come up with that. And how this really impacted Nolan and some of the other kids, I do this with other kids as well, is that then we go to the tournament, and we would be like kids, like I remember with my dad staying after baseball games looking for autographs, and we go around and get pictures with all of these people. So with Nolan, he has pictures like at various stages, like Keenan, Andre Galvao, Clark Gracie, all this. He just has like collector's cards almost. And it's kind of funny because Andre's student is always who he meets in the final. And we were successful against the student at Pans. And Andre was just, because no one came out of left field for them, because we're Brea Jiu-Jitsu. Like, who knows Brea Jiu-Jitsu? You know, we're not AOJJ, we're not Checkmat or whatever. And so Andre's talking. He recognized me from the tournaments and all this stuff. And then we showed Andre the picture of Nolan through the years with Andre taking the pictures, like trading cards. And we took another one. Bill, his dad, wanted to do that. No one was like, Dad, come on now.
Oh, I like Bill.
Yeah. So that's another way. Like things like that. Like imagine he's like not just him, but he's like my little Padawan learner. It's more like an apprenticeship, how I see, especially as they start to get preteen. It's more of apprenticeship. Like there's one, the white belt one, not the that's doing the adults class right now, with the long hair that competes a lot. I'm taking him to all the tournaments, like introducing him to people. That's the secret. Like stuff like that. It's just like you bring them into the world and they build their self-esteem, and it's a very positive type environment. That's what reminded me of name dropping, because like you could be in, there's lots of people who are advanced belts that I'll say a big name in jiu-jitsu and they don't know about. So anyways, where was I going back to? We were talking about, we were talking about successful with the Ruotolo brothers, all expectations and weight placed on them, and then not successful. So the Mendez brothers opened their academy in 2012. We did not get past that comment the last time around. And they were, I think, eager to do their style of jiu-jitsu, to focus on the kids program, and to throw out all the conventions of how jiu-jitsu is taught, because they don't teach the jiu-jitsu the way that, you know, Gracie Baja teaches jiu-jitsu. Gracie Baja uses a proxy for just like standard of practice in jiu-jitsu.
You're going to tell us your interpretation of what happened to Mason.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Did I say Mason already? Oh, no, I did say Mason already.
You did.
So
you did. I still don't know who he is.
Mason Montevey. It doesn't matter. There's a reason you don't know who he is. So when he was a white belt, the Mendez brothers made him exceptionally proficient at De La Riva and Berimbolo at a time where that was like the storm of jiu-jitsu. So you have to get this proper context in time, where, as I said before with my analogy, you know, the progressives were like, oh, it's okay to learn when you're advanced, but not when you're beginning. You can't be teaching that because they won't have a solid foundation. Anyways, he came out with a white belt highlight of him doing Berimbolo at a very good level. It was a good level. Everybody. He was Berimboloing everybody. And it's like, okay, the cool thing about jiu-jitsu is you get to throw it out on the mat and see who's better. See whose philosophy is better. His philosophy was clearly better than the other kids. The other, and it wasn't kids. He was an adult. He was an adult white belt, maybe 18, I don't know, around there. So young kid, something like that.
Young adult.
Yeah, young adult. And he was winning and he looked good. Like you could study the video and say, okay, this grip here. Okay, now I can understand this position a little bit better. And if you go back on Reddit, the thread has since been deleted. I don't know why. But it was a S-storm over the white belt learning the Berimbolo. Look what the Mendez brothers are doing wrong. They just teach leg drag and Berimbolo, which is kind of like, they're distilling it down a little bit much, but you know, it's kind of true. They're teaching leg drag Berimbolo. Okay, guys, time for the speed drill. Guys, side to side leg drag, guys. Okay. So anyways, he was incredibly proficient. So a lot of people at a time where Berimbolo and 50-50 was controversial, and the Mendez brothers represented that to that whole generation that was in conflict with it. It was a generational clash. Kind of came down on Mason's shoulders a little bit because he was their golden child. It's a lot harder than you think to get somebody that's very dedicated and can do that for years. It's much harder than you imagine to produce an elite competitor at any colored belt in the adult division. It is hard. If you have somebody that's medaling at Worlds or Pans, that is very difficult, and it's a sign that your academy is probably doing something correct, especially if it's purple belt and beyond. So anyways, but even at blue belt. So when he started to come up the ranks, apparently out of nowhere, Kennedy came. I didn't even know Cobrinha had a son, and I'll bet you didn't either until, like, juvenile. He just popped on the scene at juvenile blue belt.
Cobrinha's son.
And Cobrinha
was the big rival of the Mendez brother. So there's a little history there.
Yeah, and they do not like each other. So, and Cobrinha's here in Southern California. Mendez brothers are here in Southern California. They have competing gyms. They had a competing career where they weren't really on the best terms with each other. They don't like each other. So anyways, it comes up right about purple belt when Kennedy emerges as a son, that these two are making it to the finals of pretty much every major tournament, every tournament that they enter, because they're both very good. They're very competent jiu-jitsu players. And taken into the match was all of that weight of not only the stylist, you are the Mendez brothers style, but you are the representative of the Mendez brothers in this new age clash of Cobrinha versus Mendez. And every match scrutinized to a high level. You could hear in the stadium, when something happened, there'd be like that little momentary hush that you can only perceive in person when you're using your actual ears, that where everybody's attention is on. And it was fairly even kind of in the beginning. This is at least my memory of it. And then as they continued through the ranks and approached brown belt, it was clear that Kennedy was breaking away as far as skill level was concerned. And all of that pressure, in my opinion, led him to just crack. It just wasn't fun, probably. How is that going to be fun for you when you're dealing with all this thing? You're just trying to be the best that you can be, and like all these expectations are placed on you, and you just quit jiu-jitsu at brown belt, more or less, just abandon it. Which is a story that I'm actually coming in touch with quite a bit, where these people are actually winning, coming up the ranks, and then they don't do jiu-jitsu anymore. They're actually winning. And I can't think of them off the top of my head, but then I see their name like my post, or I see their name somewhere. I'm like, what happened to this guy?
Connor.
Connor. Yeah. So Darren Connor DeAngelis is who he's talking about. Somebody who gave up his life in Maryland to train at Atos HQ with Andre, lived in a van. And in my opinion, Andre's cooks a lot of people. It takes the joy out of it. It produces high-level guys. It's not something that Andre's doing. It's just a grind. It's just a grind every day. You're going to go with a world-class guy every single role and every day. And I find that people lose the love of it a little bit. So Connor is somebody, during the pandemic, we had a Zoom call together, and we talked about like the future of his career and things like that. And ultimately, he looks like a completely different person now. He's training casually, basically, as a black belt now. That's a story. I think that happened with Keenan, with Lloyd's, and with Andres. That's the two that just like grind you out, that suck the love out of it. And that's one thing that you really need to be cognizant of in your long-term vision of an athlete. Is one of the greatest sacrifices that you make is not the injuries and all the time away from family. Those are kind of obvious and overstated. But one of the biggest ones is love of the sport going. Would you give up? Would you trade your love of what you're doing to be at the top of it? And for some people, that's a favorable thing. And for some people, it's not a favorable thing. But that's a lot of the time what you give up to be the best. Because there's a lot of people trying to be the best, but there's only one best. Especially at that adult black belt, in the premier divisions. So anyways, I think that a little bit was Connor. Connor wanted to go back to school. My advice to him, because he went all out. He moved away from his family, his support structure, living in a van. Like, that wears on you. You're training twice a day or whatever he was doing, and lifting. So I think there was a degree of burnout personally. But my advice to him was, you owe it to yourself to do 1 year at black belt and just not end with, I could have. Because you're young right now, just do 1 year to compete against, at the time, Leandro, like the Leandro Lowe's, just to know where you're at. And if you fall short, you at least know how short you fall. And if you succeed, you're never going to say that I could have. Yeah. So that was my advice to him. But ultimately my decision was, you have to follow your heart. How Western liberal democracy is, follow your heart. This is completely like Western civilization type of advice that I gave Connor. Ultimately, he took the follow your heart advice, I think, and he did school and all that stuff. But anyways,
this is more money as an engineer than he would have made it.
Connor can make any amount of money that he wants to, because he started with DCD Jiu-Jitsu. He started like marketing himself online, and it was pretty good. Like, he was trying to get followers, but that stuff, it kind of burns you out sometimes. That's something that no one doesn't do. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't even freaking post a picture when he wins. It's Marissa that posts the picture when he wins and writes the post. He has posts on Instagram afterwards, like, oh, I'd like to thank all of my people. There's all these people tagged. I'm like, no, you did not write this. He's like, yeah, Marissa did.
Oh man,
sorry.
So I want to talk a little, actually, maybe a lot about what better is, because you said that rhetorically, like what is better. But my experience, the first time I came to this gym, I noticed a couple of things that were way different than a lot of other jiu-jitsu academies. I've visited a lot of jiu-jitsu places all over the world, and jiu-jitsu is taught, in my opinion, stupidly in a lot of places.
I teach jiu-jitsu stupid. If anybody says I'm a good teacher, they're lying. By the way,
I would never say I was a good teacher.
I do things 20% less efficiently than other teachers, and I do it better than a lot of them.
Now, two things I noticed. Now, there are a lot of nuances, but two things I noticed right away. One, you skip the traditional warm-up. It's just not there. No calisthenics, no running around, no shrimping across the mat, just straight into technique. And maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. But second, you start every roll standing up, which I greatly appreciate. Can we talk a little bit about why?
Oh, gosh. This podcast is going to be solid. You're going to run out of memory on your phone right now. That's what's going to happen. You're going to need to piece this into part 1 of 6 with Trumpet Dan and Matt
I got
Grant.
a terabyte of info on there.
By the way, we want to do a podcast together. I just have not set up the stuff. So let's deal with the second point first. Okay. Because let's start second, because that's the way that I do things.
You want me to go get lunch?
Wait, you're part of this conversation. You have any boxes to unload or anything?
Not today.
Yeah, the kids are on break. They're bored at home right now, going, "Where's Dad? When are we going to go on an adventure?" But this is fine. I like this. So starting from stand up, a lot of gyms are doing this now. I would say 50% of gyms are starting from stand up. When I started this academy, we started on the knees because it reminds me of that one Brain Games episode. I think it was the first, where they have a whole bunch of actors in a room, and they all stand up at the sound of a bell. And then there's one person who's not an actor in there, and then she's like, "Why are you standing up?" And they're like, "I don't know. You're supposed to stand up when you hear the bell." So she does it, and one by one they remove the actors, and one by one they put in regular people. And then over time, everybody who's not an actor, not paid, they're all standing up because the person before them is still standing up.
That, yeah.
You've seen that episode. I think it's the first one, so it's pretty common. You can look that one up on YouTube. It's pretty funny. It might be rigged, but the point is the same, is that we do things just because that's the way that it was done. Mm-hmm. And so starting from stand-up was something that took me about a year to just like remove the shackles from the mental shackles. So I'm not like that quick to adapt, apparently, because it took a year. Well, I don't know. How long did it take?
No, it wasn't a whole year.
You don't think so?
No.
Yeah.
He remembers better than I do.
And I should probably add that another thing that left a great impression on me is that you're a self-proclaimed guard puller. Like, you guys are really good at pulling guard, de la hiva. Like, this is your specialty, and you start from standing.
Yeah, it's an oxymoron, right? Like, I'm not a takedown guy. So you brought up 3 big things that I can talk probably an hour on each of them. So I've got to watch myself. I'll give you the abbreviated version.
Okay.
So the most important things in a match are the things that are closest to the beginning, because the only thing that you know for certain is that you'll slap and bump. And then there's only a few things that can happen after the slap and bump, and then the tree kind of branches out. And it kind of reminds me of that game that where you dropped like a peg or a ball and it hits all those pegs, and then you get a prize at the bottom, and you drop it over here and it ends up over there, and you win free steak knives instead of $1 million. You know, it reminds me a little of that. The only thing that you can really be for certain is where you drop it in the beginning. The only thing that you know for certain in a match is that it's going to start from stand up. And it's incredibly important. We're getting into the skills that scale, by the way.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important that you, if you are a guard puller, that you be able to A, get your butt on the floor before you get taken down or before they pull guard, and then B, establish your control over your opponent once you do pull guard, because that's a big window for him. I just plop my butt on the ground. I don't have any grips or control a lot of the time, depending on how I'm pulling guard, which is a whole nother conversation that I could have at great length. But that is a skill. When I came up the ranks, I was terrified of stand-up because, honestly, jiu-jitsu has terrible stand-up. It's changing. There are, especially with the American influence, the wrestling is getting better. And wrestling is the best. Sorry, judo, but wrestling is the best for Brazilian jiu-jitsu and for whatever. That's your domain, not mine. I do gi jiu-jitsu. I don't hit people in the face. And so there's just the practical, like on its surface level benefits of you're going to be doing this in the tournament. And whether you start out doing leg spaghetti because he's passing right after you pull guard for the next 2 minutes and maybe get your guard passed, but you're certainly defensive because you're not good at establishing the position after you pull guard. That's just like face value there. Because maybe the guy wants to take you down. Are you used to people trying to ankle pick you, doing a diving slip and slide style ankle pick as you pull guard? There's that. There's so much like distance management that you need to know. Really, whether it's... I'm not a boxing expert, so I talk as an amateur with boxing.
That's okay.
Whether it's boxing, whether it's self-defense jiu-jitsu, which I do not consider myself an expert of. That said, I'm probably better at self-defense than the self-defense guys. But
I would agree.
Yeah.
I could go on a tirade about self-defense, and I have many times.
Don't give me tangent because I want to stay on the point, the starting from stand-up. I kind of got sidetracked. And in sportive competitive jiu-jitsu, I don't like the term sport. I prefer the term competitive jiu-jitsu because the self-defense guys have turned sport into a pejorative.
They have.
Thing,
oh,
which
man.
is super crazy.
You only do sports. We train for the streets.
Yeah. If you want to do fighting, you have to go into MMA because that's the highest level of fighting. If you want to do like not that and you want to do like the highest jiu-jitsu, you got to compete. And so they're like trying to position themselves in between these little niches here. So they never have to test themselves. They never have to test themselves in MMA because that's apparently what they do. They do fighting, but they don't need to test themselves because for reasons. And they don't need to do jiu-jitsu tournaments because those are artificial and all that nonsense. Never mind the fact that they probably lose in 2 minutes. But anyways, I'm preaching to the choir. It seems like just by your facial expressions and your comments. So anyways, I don't know how I got on this. I could probably rewatch and retrace.
I've got beef with the self-defense industry, man. It's okay. It's the worst.
Yeah, it is.
That's where he got most of his viewers, was by not bad mouthing, but by correcting
distance.
the self-defense industry, like showing videos of people who say they know how to.
That's how you got your 127 followers.
227,000.
Oh, it's like
come on. But
Matt tells me all the time how many subscribers Ramsey has.
I'm his biggest fan. But the thing is, breaking down videos, sometimes with what's your boy's name? Chen?
Jordan Chow.
Jordan Chow, with Jordan, breaking down videos and showing how obnoxiously bad these self-defense videos are and how inadequate they are. So that's where he's made his name.
I don't want to forget this thought because the reason I brought up those three was distance. That was the thing. The idea of distance is very important from the stand-up, regardless of your goal, whether your goal is to take them down or to pull guard. And what I see so commonly at the high level too, and this is stuff that you can take advantage of, is that people will do incorrect distances. They'll get too close without any sort of grips on them. And there's stuff that can happen. It's like stepping in the pocket, but nobody's throwing a punch. Like it's kind of like, there's a lot of distance errors. And ultimately self-defense is accurately gauging distance. That's what it is. Accurately gauging distance is cover your head and hug onto them and trip them to the ground or double leg them. Like accurately gauging distance, the distance in which you can be struck and the distance in which they can kick you. That's so important. It's important for boxing, knowing what for the same reasons. different outcomes. You're trying to exchange punches with them versus trying to clinch with them. But distance is incredibly, incredibly important in competitive jiu-jitsu. And how are you going to get a sense of, I am 2 inches too close to the guy or 2 inches too far from the guy to do or not do something? So that takes a lot of time and experience to develop. And unfortunately, I didn't start on that until about maybe 9 years ago. So, I mean, I'm kind of like newer compared to my jiu-jitsu length of time that I've been in the sport doing that aspect of it. So there are immediate and practical applications of why you do that. There are also hidden things. For example, in a competition, if you're actually going against a good competitor and you do what I call a classic sweep, open guard to open guard. Let's call that a classic sweep, not like open guard to their back, which is a little bit more modern or something like that. When you sweep them, certainly in a competition, they are going to fight it, unless it's the beginning of the match. You are going to get in these situations where they don't want to be swept. And this is a range of jiu-jitsu that people don't teach. They're just untapped. Actually fighting the sweep once you're caught red-handed on the sweep. And what happens is it's a very predictable scramble. You'll most likely need to come up into a single leg or rear clinch, like behind them, grabbing around their waist, just so we're on the same terminology, and they're standing up. And you're working stand-up here. And the gyms that, because, you're standing, rear clinch, the gyms that start from the knees, this is almost like an unspoken taboo. Like, okay, you can work this position, but not too long. If you don't get it, just maybe the guy just falls down, or maybe you just re-pull guard when you're working these positions. That is one of the areas where American Jiu-Jitsu sucks, is like the fighting sweep element, where you go single leg, rear clinch, wheelbarrow, these types of positions, and then how to manage that with the boundaries. That is the less tangible, less apparent, because it's no longer taboo to stand up. You can stand up anytime you want. And one comment I get a lot, and I see a lot too, it's not just comments, is the gyms that start from their knees, they're more inclined to pass open guard on their knees, which is just wrong. Unless you're shaped like the late Orlando Sanchez, where you're just shaped like a bowling ball. You're 300 pounds, 5 foot nothing, and like you just can't be moved. That's not most people. It's just wrong because they start from here. What kind of goofy nonsense are you doing from here? This is the way that you pull guard and the resulting positions are different. They're different. You have different grips on them.
It's
the
subtle,
leg positioning is different. And I mean, it has a mild level of carryover, but very little. You want to be trying to replicate the game-like experience, not in the game, so to speak. So the argument that people use is that when you have somebody doing stand-up and there are people on the ground, that the people doing stand-up can crash into the people on the ground. That and it's a safety issue.
Yes, and they'll always say there's not enough space. And
there's not enough space.
This isn't a huge gym. It's a pretty normal size.
It's 1,300 square feet mat space. This is probably a 2,100 square foot building, 1,300 square feet.
I've seen much larger gyms say we don't have enough space to start from the feet.
Dude, there will be people that train after class. They're the only ones on the mat, and they will still start from the knees. Remember what I said about standing up, in the Brain Games show? Yeah. It's like your argument is complete bunk, because even if what you say is true, then when there is space, you should be doing it in stand-up. There has been times in here, especially around Worlds, where I don't want anybody doing stand-up. I will still say start from stand-up, but I'll say one of you needs to pull guard. When there's 70 people on this map, which it gets like that, around those big tournaments, then it is legitimate unsafe. But most of the time, it's fine. Most of the time, you have like your average density of people. And maybe if you have a whole class and they're all used to not starting from stand-up, maybe it can be a little bit increased, not as much as you think, on the safety. But as soon as you get people that are experienced with that, it's like the heel hook argument. A lot of the danger, not all of it, but a lot of the danger comes from ignorance.
Yes.
Like people not knowing that they're caught in a heel hook, and they just like try and spin out of a inside heel hook, and you don't spin out of an inside heel hook. And it's like, a lot of it is ignorance. So there is that. Like if you're all starting brand new at the same, you might want to phase it in and things, but you might want to have discussions about it. Now it's actually an asset, because when you're standing, whether you're working that near sweep or you're working takedowns, one of the most important dynamics is the competition space management. I mean, shooting a blast double leg, you are going to use basically the whole mat. to do that blast double leg? How do you turn the corner in a way where you can keep it in bounds? On a simple level, this is competition space management. Whether I'm on the ground or whether I'm doing stand-up and there's people on the ground, I am always using the obstacles to increase my mat awareness for the purpose of competition space awareness. And this is something that's not taught. I teach it in my classes. These are things that I go over at great length, I think. Of like, okay, we have this sweep right now, but right here is the safety area. We can't do that sweep. Even though it's easy, I could do it, but I know he's going to scramble out and then it's going to go all bad for me. So I'm going to need to modify my technique just for the safety area. I'll say, hey, this sweep we can do, but normally I'd like to do it like this. But if you're low on space, you can do it like that. And then you use the obstacles that you have around you as your competition space mat awareness training, because that's very, very important. Like white belts, they have like blinders on. And that's also why it's important to not have two white belts go against each other, despite Henry Gracie's testimony to the contrary. Yeah. It is against industry custom for a white belt to roll with another white belt. Are you serious? That makes it safer? No, man, that's why it's important to have like so somebody with
that verbiage, industry standard. Like,
yeah, that's just legalese.
Who decides that?
Industry custom, industry standard. Henry decides it in that case. Anyways, I already did a podcast on that. Stephen Keston's, go listen to it. That increases the mat awareness, and having a senior member roll with the new people is important for that as well. And that's just every aspect of jiu-jitsu.
That's why I roll with everybody, because I'm the most senior guy here.
So, Matt Grant, we roll. What am I going to do before you can do anything?
I'm not going to tell, because my competition might be watching.
Oh, this competition won't be able to do jack.
Oh, yeah. My competition is already in bed. He sits down and holds my sleeves. Drives me crazy.
But it's like, okay, so Matt wants to go double underhooks on me because I know that's his thing. So, like, what's the worst thing for a double underhooks guy? They would hate to have their sleeves controlled because they can't just go on their knees and pummel their hands underneath. So then how do I get control of his sleeves? Like, I seem to just always have it. How? It's in the stand-up phase.
He cheats. That's what he's doing. He doesn't slap. He just fake slaps and grabs my sleeves.
He's lying right now. The reality is the sequences from the beginning I have done so many times. I'm not saying I'm invulnerable. I'm invulnerable to you, but I'm not saying I'm invulnerable to everybody. But I've done these sequences so much that I'm good at pulling before he can pull, because he's a good half guard player. So I pull first, and then I'm so good at establishing the control before he can get like his double underhooks. And that is the type of training that you'll get when you do stand-up. You're working your primary sequences, the sequences that you will be doing 5 seconds into the match, and you're working them every time that you roll. So, like, let's say you're super nervous, you're a new white belt, and you really want to compete, you sacrifice your $125, you want to make sure that you don't just go home with a free t-shirt. And that is going to be decided in probably those opening moments. Like, if you pull guard bad and don't get control and the guy's just passing right away, which there's a huge avenue to exploit there, how are you going to exploit that if you're not practicing the guy pulling guard on you? It's not just for the bottom person, it's for the top person. How are you going to practice taking down a guard puller before he pulls guard? A competent one.
Yeah, that's a very unique skill set.
Yeah. And I think it was very similar when we rolled. It was like I was able, like, I know the critical windows of when I'm pulling guard and when I'm vulnerable, and I will work with urgency to close those windows to secure, and then I can cruise when I have the control. And then when I have the control, it's all gravy, you know? So that's an example of the benefits of starting from stand-up. No American gym should be starting from the knees anymore, unless your density is just so overwhelming that it's going to be a safety hazard. I've had one injury. It was a minor injury. It was I think somebody fell on the knee in an awkward way. I think Brent got injured. And that's one time, 10 years.
Matthew had his knee blown out.
That was from the knees, actually. It was a flying triangle from the knees.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was flying triangle from the knees.
It was what? Hair
Richard, flying triangle from the knees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you want to call that flying triangle.
Okay, well, anyway.
Yeah. So, So anyways, the idea is it's just going to be a background noise as far as like the injuries that you would receive. I mean, you're going to be injured in all sorts of different stuff doing jiu-jitsu because it's a full contact sport. So that was thing number one. That was the abbreviated version.
Right.
Because you can get into more of the nuance. We could talk about the specific sequences. I could give you specific examples of the types of things that you'll be working. That would be the long version. Now, your point number one that I did differently was skipping warm-ups. I believe very strongly in warming up. So you can't say that I have some sort of philosophy or against warming up. You know.
So skipping warm-up is probably the wrong verbiage to use there.
You know, it's funny because I teach a class often at another gym, and Dan has this. He says, "Okay, everybody, we're doing this pass. We're doing this pass." And I says, "You know the difference between you and me? You're doing this and calling it drilling. At the other gym, I do this and I call it warm-up. It's the exact same thing."
Yeah. So, like, you can. I don't really do this. I just do whatever I'm going to do. I just start with the technique. But it's so easy to make like a drill. I don't do this. I don't do things one way. Maybe I'll do it today just because I said I don't do it. You could just make a drill of the week. And it's like Toriando from side to side, leg drag from side to side, something that gets you moving that actually has jiu-jitsu application. Like, yes, a hip escape the mat has application. We're going to hip escape. But like every day for 10 years, you kidding me? You're going to freaking hate this warm-up. You're going to be that purple belt that shows up late to class. Like, people come generally.
Yeah, that stereotype exists for a reason.
Yes, it does exist for a reason because you don't want to be doing push-ups. Like, push-ups is really bad one. At least with hip escapes, at least you're doing something loosely. But push-ups, you're going to use your body. Your body has finite resources for the day, and you're going to be using that on push-ups and sit-ups. Yeah, it's crazy. So, anyways, I do believe strongly in warm-up. When I just wrote a post on my Facebook, nobody follows Facebook anymore. I kind of like it that way. Kind of like being in my own little niche. But I wrote a post. I did this warm-up for Shane Fishman prior to the last competition. Which one was the big one? Worlds. Okay. Yeah, so I did it for Worlds. He asked me to do the cornering and the management of the competition. And so I posted what I did for him, which is my method of warming up. And it's basically an hour-long process to warm up, where you start real slow. You have a spotter looking to bring you over at the right time. So I talked about, when is the right time to come over, because the warm-up for competition, you think you're warmed up and then you go sit in a bullpen for 30 minutes. And by the time you get out there, you're not really warmed up anymore. Yeah. So I talked about how to manage the time of the warm-up within the context of an IBJJF match. But long and the short of it, it was a very long, drawn-out warm-up where you crescendo to a point, starting with either foam rolling or sports massage, going into light rolling with rest in between the very light rolling, and then you do it. I like to warm up through the rolling, personally, for competition. I don't find that running and jumping jacks and push-ups and burpees it can be effective, but I don't also want to tire the athlete out. I don't want them to be tired, and I want them sweating. I want them to feel like the third round of your training. That's what I want it to feel like right when you step out on the mat. There's a whole like tips and tricks to get it that way, because that is quite difficult because you have to know the system. But anyways, the whole point of me telling this kind of side story is that it is very important to warm up. One of the most important things, but yet I don't warm up. Look, if you want to run here, like Millidan runs here every morning. If you want to run here, I think it's a good thing to do your own warm-up. But like, we're going to be drilling techniques for 40 minutes. Like, you're going to be moving with the techniques most of the time. So like, hopefully after moving, you can take it upon yourself to move in a way that kind of like engages your muscles, your legs, and your arms for 40 minutes to where you're actually doing something. Most of the time, it's quite fine. So yes, no warm-ups. Now let's talk. That's kind of the less interesting part of this discussion. The more interesting,
your warm up for jiu-jitsu is doing jiu-jitsu.
That's super complicated, huh? Yeah, but not. You don't go into like rolling right away. You do need to move a little bit. When I'm not doing the drilling, so I'm still very choosy because of head issues and post-concussion syndrome lingering, but generally still okay. But I will be very picky of my first round so I can warm up with the jiu-jitsu. So I typically pick like a non-aggressive white belt or kid or something like that to warm up my first one. But I could probably jump and find, but that's using my experience. Even without a warm-up, I could probably do okay. I think when you're a white belt, you just command your body to do stuff it's not ready for, and you're ignorant of the fact that you're commanding your body to do something it's not ignorant of. So anyways, the more interesting aspect of this is that depending on how your class is structured, I think the average in jiu-jitsu would be an hour and a half class. Okay, let's break this down. So the first premise is that if you roll for 30 minutes, you'll suck. I'm using a little harsh term. With my students,
That's okay.
my students, I use the term hobbyist, but they're interchangeable.
Okay.
It's okay. It's okay to suck and enjoy something,
Suck
right?
and hobbyist
Suck
right
/
there.
hobbyist.
Yeah. There I am with my profanity again.
That's it.
No, you'll be a hobbyist, and there's nothing wrong with being a hobbyist. They're completely fine with being a hobbyist.
Yeah,
but we need to call a spade a spade. If you roll for 30 minutes, you're going to be a hobbyist, especially if you put like a lot of rest in between. If you're taking like 2.5 minutes in between rounds, and there's like 5-minute rounds with 2.5 minutes of rest, it's like, that's going to be a rough go. So, assuming you don't want to be, we have a bell curve of skill. Like 30 minutes of rolling puts you a little bit to the left, where the left is the bad side on the bell curve, just in case you're unfamiliar with bell curves. The 0 is on the left, the 100% is on the right. So do you really want to be like slightly left of average rolling 30 minutes? I would say no. So if you want to just be like, I think most people are in this type of mindset. Like, I might not want to compete. Maybe at some point in the future, I want to compete. Maybe just not yet. Maybe I'll dabble with it here and there. And then when they feel they increase their confidence, then they compete, and maybe just do 1 or 2 competitions a year, if that. I think that's where most people are.
If you're Master 7 and you roll 30 minutes, you're on the right side of the bell curve. So he's talking about, see, Dan's problem is he doesn't understand that there's actually a thing as age.
Hang on, I need to interject because now Matt's attacking me. First, Matt trains twice a day, every single day. He trains twice a day. In the morning class, he usually does, which is where he trains here. He trains at 2 places. He typically does 15 minutes of rolling time here, and then he does what he does in the evening. So he is rolling quite a bit. He's rolling a lot more than he's leading you on. He's trying to misdirect and trick his competition. You don't need to roll if you're a Master 7, Grandpa. You don't need to roll to beat me. That's a lie. Matt is tough. Don't get anything crossed here.
I keyed into one of Matt's tricks today, which is he talks to you while he rolls with you.
Oh, gosh.
And he tells me he does this while he competes. Yeah. And the thing is, when Matt is talking to me, like I'm thinking about, I need to improve position. I'm going to attack right here. And he starts chatting. And I'm like, well, I can't do it while he's chatting. I need to, it would be impolite. So does it pan out that way in competition?
Pretty close.
Okay. No. Don't ask Matt this. I got to tell it the right way. So Matt talks constantly. This is actually the quietest I've seen Matt because, I'm kind of monopolizing the conversation a little bit. But if Matt is awake, his mouth is moving. That's something that you need to understand about Matt. And we did some trip together. I don't remember what it was, but
it was Master Worlds.
How did we get there? By plane?
No, I stayed the extra day to watch my grandkids, and you had people coming in.
So Matt will check into the hotel and he'll talk to the guy in line behind him. He doesn't know him. He'll check into the hotel and strike up a conversation with the guy checking him in. He'll go to his room, and the person in the elevator, he talks to the person in the elevator.
When we get to our room, checkout, I get it.
And I'm trying to sleep. He's still talking to me, asking questions and all this stuff. And he literally does not stop talking until he is unconscious. And then the first thing he wakes up, he immediately asks a question. I mean, immediately. So back to competition, and he's talking with Ramsey. That's no surprise to me. Matt will actually talk to his opponents in competition. And Matt's kind of like disarming with the way that he talks. Like he kind of has this vibe of like, I'm an old guy. I'm not that threatening.
That's before. Like
he talks to the referees during the match, and the referees just kind of like he'll make jokes because they're kind of funny. you want me to go down there? I'm so old. I can't go down there. You know, the ref's not going to give him a penalty for that because, you know, he's master 7 and he's cracking a
Isn't
joke.
it like technically illegal to talk to the ref?
Yeah, you're not supposed to speak to the ref.
But you can speak to your.
But Matt is
opponent?
disarming. He has a skill. Like he's like pseudo in sales, you know. So he has that like disarming skill, and like with all of his opponents, he's kind of able to like disarm them before the match, during the match, after the match, and it's like like funny stuff too. It's like he'll say, "Please don't go any harder on the crossface." Like he'll say like stuff like that. It's not just like trying to trick him. Like he's like letting you know that it's like kind of terrible for him in this crossface. Now there's one guy that he competes against, not in his age category or his weight category. There's one guy that he can't disarm and wants nothing to do with him.
I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. I'll get him.
Yeah, no. So this thing about him trying to talk, he does use a trick. With me, he tries to reset in completely different positions. No, you weren't here. I was past your guard. Matt, you were caught in the spider guard. You weren't in side control.
Dan has problems remembering where we were at.
I assure you, I do not have problems remembering where I'm at. One thing that's certain is this. Wow, we got sidetracked. We were talking about the class structure and no warm-ups. And then he got on old guy conversation. So
it's very disarming, I know.
So I needed to clarify that Matt rolls a lot because he was like saying, "Oh, guys don't need to roll. You need to roll. If you're going to compete, you need to roll." It is less, but you do need to roll. So if you want to be like in that spot where it's like, I want to compete and maybe do well, maybe take home a medal or something, maybe. And note the maybe. You need to bring it to 45 minutes. 45 minutes of sparring. That's kind of where I think it needs to go. We do 50. So what we do is we do King of the Hill. I really like King of the Hill now.
That's a great drill.
Yeah. And the reason, so we break into groups of 3. This is something that we do daily. I need to mix it up because I'm just following into my routines, which I don't really like. I don't like routines. But we do 20 minutes, groups of 3, and generally comparably skilled people. But it's very good because it scales with the experience level. If you're the most experienced person, you're getting fresh people. The other 2 are constantly getting rest and attacking you. And literally doing anything for 20 minutes, whether it's just like stand up because you won and then do something, stand up again because you won. Like just standing up for 20 minutes, that's going to be a great workout. So the people who are the best and need it the most, they get the most out of it. The people who are losing, they get the most rest, and they probably need the most rest, and they can kind of scale with it. And you're working those beginning sequences. We start King of the Hill stand up every time. You're working your initial sequences, whether it's takedowns, whether it's point guard.
Just so everybody knows what King of the Hill is.
So you have to score points, and the first person to score points is the winner. Any way that you want.
You have 1 minute time limit. 1
minute maximum. So we do that for 20 minutes. So that combined with the 30 minutes of just regular rolling, 7 minutes, 1 minute in between. It's kind of hard.
If the score's tied, the winner stays on.
Now, that 50 minutes does not put you in the elite. It puts you close, and it depends who you're going with within that time. But I would argue that the elite competitor needs 1 hour. 1 hour of training. Doesn't matter if it comes a little in the morning, a little in the evening, which is what I like to do. That's what I recommend for my elite people or people striving to be elite, is maybe 2 rounds in the morning and then the 50 minutes at night. And that works well because the morning class I kind of structure a little bit more for the professionals, a little bit more for people who got to get to work. And the evening class is like prime time. And that's your time to experiment with like lesser skilled people. It's your time to maybe learn more techniques because I generally go an hour. That one I do 30 minutes because it's for hobbyists in the morning. And then for my non-hobbyists, they get that little extra bit to kick it up to an hour to an hour and 15. Hour and 15 you shouldn't go beyond. But there are people that train hour and 15 Monday through Friday, weekends off. So that's kind of like we need to lay the groundwork for your expectations in your time sparring. Now, let's say that you do what I do, and it's 50 minutes. So, like, hopefully we're bringing home medals for those that are experienced in that area. It's like, what does that leave? That leaves 40 minutes for everything else. Now, if I do a 20-minute warm-up, which is typical, a lot of people do 15, 20 minutes. What does that leave? It leaves you 20 minutes. 20 minutes to get good at jiu-jitsu. You think you're getting good in 20 minutes? No. I can barely get out what I need to say in 40. because I do tell a lot of stories that are pointless, but that kind of makes it fun, I think. Some people, I have one purple belt that says, Dan, I'm just here for the stories. I'm not really here for the jiu-jitsu. He came from another gym. He just really likes the stories. Shout out, John. So, yes. So 20 minutes is unacceptable for the techniques. You can't properly massage. You can't properly show the technique being done in competition. You know, you can't do analysis videos. I can barely fit in analysis videos, and I squeeze them in.
Yeah, you did a short analysis video last time I was here, and it's very similar in nature to what we're discussing now, sacrificing time for a result. We were looking at like a guard pulling entry at the beginning of a tournament, and you discussed how this is, how did you word it? Like
we're talking about guard pulling. It sounds like you're describing pulling guard is always a compromise between how quick you want to do it and how much control you want once you're there.
Yeah.
So pulling guard slowly is risky. So one way would be make 2 really good grips, then sit, foot on their hip or something like this, and then pull guard. And you have good control because you have these 2 grips, and those 2 grips took time to make. You had to open up, make 1, make 2. And in that time, you can be taken down, or even probably more importantly for Mini, is that he could pull guard first, and then the match is taking place and not in your favorite location. So on the opposite end, so that would be spending more time, 2 good grips. And some of my heavyweight, I have one purple belt heavyweight. He always gets to make 2 really good grips before he pulls guard. He can always seem to get to pull close guard because he has 2 really good grips and just suck the guy in because he's in the heavyweight category and the guys aren't just going to do something real fast like pull guard. So that's the example of the slow. The fast is like as soon as you touch something, your butt's on the floor and there's distance between the 2 of you and you don't have good control. That's the way that you almost certainly need to do it at the elite level of the sport. But there is a whole can of worms because you don't have any control in order to do that. Let's see if I'm in frame. Hold this.
I think we've been slowly scooting back this whole entire time.
That's Matt, not me. So if I'm here and I make the grip like this, when I pull guard kind of like with my legs back like that, I have this collar grip, but it's barely, and it's just to satisfy the rules requirement. It probably strips, maybe it doesn't, but leveraging this into now how do I get to my control position? You know, most likely the position that you're going to establish if you're a legs on the outside guy is De La Riva. Yeah. Most likely. That's why it's so important. Even if you hate De La Riva, even if you want to play spider, De La Riva is your little hub from no control. The easiest way to get control if you're a legs outside guy, so distance management guy, not a butterfly guy.
This we should probably put the mic back on.
Yeah, sorry.
You can move around with these on. They're very durable.
Yeah. So we'll scoot up. There, we're right here. Now, if you crop the video before, now you have to recrop it afterwards. And, okay.
It's okay.
So that's the compromise that you always have. And at the higher level, it's always going to be the fast pull. But the fast pull, as I said, you are now tapping into a skill set that has a high prerequisite, which is I have no control in the guys like on top of me. So there's a bar that you need to cross. My workaround until they have that skill in the guard to maintain it and establish those grips, because it's very chaotic. It takes a lot of skill and it's somewhat unpredictable because he can move any way. I have no control over him. But once that bar is crossed, you're now doing things like that have that high ceiling.
I think what Ramsey was asking was not for you to explain the guard pull, but was to explain that you show videos during class.
But he was saying that was what I was talking about.
But you take time away from rolling and training to show videos, to show people. So that's something that you feel is important for their learning experience.
Yes, and it's a long-term thing because the gains are in the future. It's like investing in your retirement, right? You want to have already seen what people are doing in competition. Like, oh, look, they went out of bounds here. If they had just kept it in bounds, this and this would have happened instead of that and that. You have to see that. Most people figure that type of stuff out through competing themselves. And it takes a lot of competitions to start to piece this together. But they get to see it. And they get to set the ideal based on, I'm looking at the TV, that's why I'm looking at it.
I love the fact that you do film studies in class.
That's not abnormal for me, I guess, anymore. Because I've just been doing it so long. So it's like routine for me. But
I've actually never seen that at another academy.
Yeah, probably nobody can do what I do.
Well, I agree. You break down.
No, people can break down.
Well, you do it better than most. I mean, if I was going to give you, say, what are you top at? You're really top at breaking down a match.
Yeah, let's talk about this as well, because I think there's a lot of very good breakdown channels. BJJ Scout was like one of those big ones. But that is a prepared breakdown. The breakdown that I did for you was completely ad lib. It's just, I pull up a random match and then analyze it. And if I can, if the match enables me to, relate it to what we learned in the class or something similar. And because the stuff I'm going over in the class is the stuff that you're going to encounter at the black belt level, at a high level of jiu-jitsu and competitive jiu-jitsu, it's very easy to be at least like 1, maybe 2 degrees away from what we've actually gone over. And I think, did that particular match have something that we went over in the class? Yes, because I taught smash pass, and then I taught him one possible problem with the smash pass is they're able to get in single leg X from folding pass, some people call it, we call it smash pass here, with legs to the side. And this position actually played out in the match several times, actually, and that was unplanned. I didn't do that, and it's not by coincidence. It's because the ratio at which I teach the positions that I'm teaching is the right ratio for competition. So if you watch a few matches, you're going to find the stuff that I'm showing. Whereas I think a lot of people teach, it's not all techniques, but a lot of people teach stuff that you can watch 30 matches and not even see that stuff anywhere. So kind of where we're talking about video analysis is time allocation. Yes, I will often take 10 minutes of my precious 40 minutes to do that. And that's long-term development. So I have 30 minutes to convey something. I mean, that is nothing. I mean, 30 minutes is like, oh my gosh, I gotta go. And sometimes the drilling isn't as long as I want because I like to properly massage my stories. I like to properly, like, what I see it is, it's like, I want to build the shelving to which, or the file cabinets in which you put the things in. I see the techniques as the things that you're putting in, the pieces of paper that you're organizing. But I think more important than the techniques, there's too much emphasis on techniques, is that filing and cataloging system. Where does this fit into the greater context? I can teach somebody, we live next, or we're next to a taco place. I can teach anybody going to get a taco next door, just pull them in here. I can teach them any move in jiu-jitsu their first day. It's clearly not this grip here, grip like this, grip like that. That's the hard part about jiu-jitsu. It's actually the easiest part about jiu-jitsu. And then like above that, there's so much more. This part has been overemphasized because of how jiu-jitsu came to America. Horion overemphasized this part of jiu-jitsu. And then the subsequent downstream effects is that like Americans, because he was the first, and the first is very influential.
By this part of jiu-jitsu, you mean like
this grip here, here, and then sweep like that. And then if you put the grip here, it's not going to work. We have too much of that. And I alluded to earlier how Brazilians show up to LAX and they're just like improvise their solution. And then I don't know if it was very clear, but I said also, this is a part of their personality that manifests in jiu-jitsu, and you can't separate the personality from the jiu-jitsu. Brazilians are much more like goal oriented. My goal is to get to here, like just get to there, like arrange yourself in the way that you need to get to there and just maintain your eyes on the goal. Americans have a little bit more paralysis by analysis, because of the way that we've been taught and by the people that we've been taught by early on, and then the seeds spread. It's like, if you make the grip here, it will work, and if here, it won't work. It's kind of like black and white thinking that Americans have a little bit.
Yeah, there's a right way and a wrong way to do the technique, and that's it.
Yes, but even more than that, it's just like emphasis that the technique is everything. The technique is probably, honestly, the least important part. Like, if you look at high-level athletes, and you look at the common threads between them, their jiu-jitsu is more or less different. Like, there are things like the recognition to response phase, like quick recognition to the situation response. In military cycles, and in a class I use this as well, OODA loop kind of has a rough carryover. If you want to OODA loop that on Wikipedia, there's a Wikipedia page. But basically, the OODA loop in a military context, is the whole process from recognition to response. And the quicker that you form that loop, because it's an infinite loop, is in jiu-jitsu, one of the main categories that makes you good versus not good. And the OODA loop, your recognition, what position am I in? What are the 3 goals for me? What are the 3 goals for him? Oh, I moved this little thing. Now the position changed. I have the 3 new goals. He has 3 new goals. What can I allow to happen? What do I want to happen? That changes so quickly. And oftentimes people will call me fast. Matt calls me fast all the time, I think. Is that you?
It's not me.
Oh, I'm not fast.
I call you intuitive.
Yeah, I think Matt corrects the people that call me fast because I feel fast and I'm very slow. Like as a person, I'm very slow. Look at the speed at which my body is moving. It's slow. But when a intermediate practitioner rolls with me, they feel that I'm so fast because my OODA loop is much faster than theirs. I'm recognizing and responding faster, but I'm not.
He recognizes positions. I brought this up in class once because, Larry Bird, great basketball player.
Yeah, okay.
And why was Larry Bird a great basketball player? Because he was one step ahead of everybody. Because he recognized where the ball was going, off of a rebound or off of where he needed to be to get the rebound. He just was mentally, physically, he probably was not at the same level of the NBA stars he competed with, but mentally he could make up for that by being just, we're talking half a second. Half a second's a lot when it comes to that.
Oh, jiu-jitsu is far faster than half a second.
Yeah.
Half a second is like, if I take half a second away from my reaction time, I'm a purple belt. Yeah, the recognition to response is so important. And the framework in which we were talking about this is that I do these other things to try and give them the scaffolding on where to put any individual technique, which really isn't that important to me. It's like the scaffolding kind of forms the structure that you're building. That's kind of my point there. And then we went on a little tangent about how I didn't really think that techniques were so important.
Yeah.
Like I teach something.
That's a super interesting concept to me. Like I'm going to nerd out about Tai Chi for a minute, but this is something, there are not a lot of people who are good at Tai Chi as a combative art these days. But I met one dude who learned a little bit from him. And the thing I learned is that there are techniques, there are takedowns, there are sweeps, there are trips, there are joint locks, etc. But that's of secondary importance. What he really put the most emphasis on was what's called structural strength, Pengjin in Chinese. But structural strength was like the big thing, which is interesting how you say like structure is the most important thing in jiu-jitsu. As man. Anyway, continue.
How about we give an example? We'll have to watch our heads. Let me give an example of maybe even show the structure of passing. We have what I call the skeleton structure. And this is the basic format in which you approach to passing the guard. And if it provides your trunk, and there's offshoots, yes, but you can always relate everything to the skeleton structure and maintain that perspective of what you're trying to accomplish. And the skeleton structure is positional play, ultimately, until the end, until you get a great position to be able to pass. So it's no longer trying to pass from a position which is 50 him, 50 you, not 50-50 the position, but just we're equal in this position here. It's about taking the 50-50 position and making it 55-45, and then 60-40, and then 65, et cetera, 35.
Progressing your position.
Positional play. And that positional play, as you're passing the guard, then sure, you can pass right from 50-50. Not 50-50 guard. 50-50, 50 him, 50 you. You can even pass when it's 40% me and 60% him. There are passes that exist from positions like this. But to maintain that always forward sense of momentum with positional play, sure, there might be passes along the way, but when you can't do them, then you increase your position. You fight those little battles to increase your position. Most of the time when you're doing high-level jiu-jitsu, you're not doing pass sweeps, submissions. You're not doing point-scoring things. So what's the middle? The middle is the minute positional play. And that structure of the positional play is that scaffolding that I'm showing you, at least on the bottom or on the top. And we have it on the bottom as well. like the hierarchy of guards, like very simply. On a very simplistic level, could be attack with the closed guard first, then attack with the open guard, then attack with the half guard. That could be a very, very simple structure. I don't often phrase it exactly like that. I do it with more nuance. But that would be an example of a very simple structure from which you layer your techniques on. Where does this underhook half guard thing fall in? Oh, it's when I fail at the open guard. So it kind of provides that higher order thing. And then as you get more experience, the structure becomes more nuanced. It's, okay, I attack with these movements when he's seated in my closed guard. I attack with these movements when he's standing in my closed guard. So I subcategorized one thing, which was previously just closed guard, into two things. And then doing the same with the other positions. You might have, instead of just half guard, then it's open half guard where I'm keeping space and distance, and then a tight half guard where I'm not. For example, underhook or deep half guard. And then you can subcategorize it further. So instead of just closed guard seating, it's closed guard seating, no posture, closed guard seating, posture, standing with no posture, standing with tall posture. And then you could subcategorize it even more. Standing with no posture, legs together, standing with no posture, legs apart. Standing full posture, legs together, seated like you're sitting in an invisible chair. There's all these, the structure is originally just three categories. Closed guard first, open guard second, half guard third. That forms your approach to jiu-jitsu. And then you start to break this thing into two parts, and then those two parts into more two parts, and then those two parts into more two parts. But it always relates to the structure that you're laying down. That would be an example on the bottom. And it's very important. That's what I mean by having like that structure to file the techniques on. Now I don't care what your solution is when he is standing with no posture, legs together. I mean, there's a lot of solutions that you could do. You could do the mermaid sweep where you lock your closed guard around their knees. You could do a ton of things. There's like a lot of answers. You could go for an arm bar if you want. That's not my solution. But
basically, once he's in a bad position, everything works.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
I'm saying that you recognize this position in the greater structure, and your solution to this position and how it fits in the greater structure can vary. I don't care if you choose this one or this one or this one. Sometimes I care. Sometimes I provide guidance on, no, this solution is not a good solution for the high level. But I mean, sure, this really good guy who competes at the high level does this solution in this position. This one does this one. I don't care. You choose the one you like, and I'll help you like explore that. That's what I mean about, like, I don't care. I do care about the techniques. I have to provide mentorship and guidance on which ones will not work at the high level. But I care more about the structure, that you get the structure right. If you're somebody that rejects the structure of what I'm laying down, then it's going to be harder for me to help. And that's why it's very difficult for me to help.
That was me he was talking about.
Kind of. But I also have structure modifiers. So it's like, that's where the talent as a teacher comes in. I'm not going to tell Matt to play open guard because he's a half guard player. If you're so good there, just accept it. He's good at a half guard. Pull half guard, work the underhook half, work if they go knee slice, then you work the lapel single, and then guide that match there. Now, that's not the way that I would build it if I build it from scratch. But anyways, you have to know when to give and when to insist.
I fall into that old dog, new tricks scenario.
Yeah.
Hard to teach.
So, relating to class time, I have to take a certain amount of class time to convey this to the students, to convey what the structure is. And so they're clear on that, and that takes time out of drilling. So a lot of the time I use the analysis time to do that. But I will do it in the position. I ad lib all my classes. It's not like I have a curriculum or something like that, which I don't think is the way to do it. That's because I aim to be like a middle-aged blacksmith, and I have some apprentices. And the curriculum, you have to do a curriculum when you get over 150 students about there. Because, I mean, there's a lot of research about that 150 number, is that, forgive me if this is not your persuasion, but we evolved working in small bands of hunter and gatherers. Our brains are designed to hold information and connections with about roughly 150 people before it starts to break down and you just can't follow it anymore. What's this person's relationship to this one? Do they like them and this like this? It's the same thing for jiu-jitsu, remembering where they are in their development and all that good stuff. When you get over that 150 mark, you need to turn it into the Industrial Revolution. You need to have it be assembly line style And that's one of the conscious choices I make about my academy is I need to keep it under the 150 mark so I can do apprenticeship style teaching, apprenticeship and mentor style teaching. Like the new white belts, I pay the most attention to. I'm doing King of the Hill with the white belts. So, and the whole time I'm being like, I beat you because of this. You didn't kill my De La Riva hook here. Why didn't you kill my De La Riva hook? You just drilled it for 30 minutes or something like that. You can see now you made the grip. It wasn't a great grip and it didn't work because of X, Y, and Z. That's where my attention is because I'm mentoring them. I pay most attention to the white belts and the least attention to the Matt Grants of the world. And that's because they need the most help. Matt Grant's already set in his way. His old dog, new tricks, all that. So the class structure is organized in a way that suits my objective. I want my students to be able to compete, maybe not be the best in the world, but I want them to be able to compete and be able to compete well. So that sets my sparring time. I want it 50 minutes, not an hour. Then you're getting pretty grueling. 50 minutes is pushing it for a lot of people. So I also need to do the analysis so that they can understand jiu-jitsu, have a proper structure from which to layer the techniques, and then I have the techniques themselves. And I don't have time for the warm-ups. I just don't have time. I don't want to teach a 2-hour class. I want to get home to my kids. 2 hours starts to linger a little bit too. People start to fatigue mentally and physically in 2 hours. So I have to fit it all in. So that's why I don't do warm-ups. See, I said that first answer I could go in an hour. This one I actually did go in an hour. So that
it's a good answer.
You better be careful about asking me a question because I'm going to go, oh, no. First, we need to dissect the historical reasons for your question. Then we need to deconstruct that so we can overcome the limitations.
You're either going to love or hate my next question, then, Dan, because it's a complex one.
Okay.
So
do I need to lay down for this?
You might,
Matt needs his midday nap. I mean, Master 7. Come on, Matt's about, like I said, Matt's quiet when he's sleeping. He's about to fall asleep.
It's about scoring in jiu-jitsu tournaments.
Yeah.
The scoring system of jiu-jitsu tournaments and how it should be known that any change in any combat sport, you change a rule ever so slightly, it changes it essentially into a different combat sport.
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
And I'm not the biggest fan of IBJJF rules, but it is the most what do we say? Prestigious, popular, widespread
in the gi
organization in the gi. Yeah. So it's the one I end up competing under the most. So as far as jiu-jitsu goes, it's the one most people end up competing under the most. But there are a lot of complaints and so on. And so I've wondered for a long time, like, well, what rule changes would make the sport better? What rule changes might make it worse, etc. There was a rule change a while back for white belts only, where they're not allowed to jump guard anymore. They can pull guard if they have a grip, but they can't jump into guard. And from my perspective, that made the sport a lot better. It made the white belt division a lot more interesting visually and
well, it made it safer.
It definitely made it safer because jumping guard has caused a lot of catastrophic knee injuries. But the intention was safety, but the result was it made the matches a lot more interesting to watch. So my question for you, Matt, first of all, and I have a few more questions along this line, but let's tackle this one first. If you could make any change or changes you wanted to the scoring system of IBJJF rules, what would they be?
I would change.
Matt, I've been talking too long. Let Matt take this.
I would make the crucifix a scoring position.
Oh.
I would give either 3 or 4 points for the crucifix. I think it's as dominant a position as mount and back take, and I think you would see more people, working to get into that position, and I think it's just a position that it's a wasted position because basically you get someone there, you're not going to get any points, you just have to submit them, so you'll get your advantage. But I think, there's a lot of subtle things. I think it's hard when you try to make a rule change that's going to affect the young athletic adult division, but still carry over and make it so the older people can still compete in a certain way. Go ahead, Dan.
That was it.
That's it.
Okay. So first, like your question was very long, and there was multiple parts to your question.
Yeah, it's a little nuanced,
no,
I know.
No, but it's like I feel like I need to correct parts of the question and the parts of like statements. So I know what you're looking for. You're looking for me to takedown should be worth 2 or like something like this. Like, or excuse me, you're right. I meant to say pulling guard should be -2, something like that, something like super like revolutionary. Where my true answer, I'll just answer it first. My true answer would be what change needs to happen immediately is they need to make the appropriate women's divisions. So women's divisions stop at heavy. There's no super heavy and there's no ultra heavy.
Oh, yeah.
So that is the number one thing that the IBJJF needs to fix now. Because heavyweight, forgive me, I don't know the exact weight cutoff. I should, but I don't. It's roughly 170 something. And that is the unlimited category. 170 pounds is not a big person. It's not. So you have like the Gabbies. Okay, I'm not like shaming anybody, but Gabby is bigger. Like Tayani is bigger. These are heavy people. So you have somebody effectively competing. If they are actually a true heavyweight, they're effectively competing up 2 weight classes. And it's crazy. I understand. So I need to provide some historical, I need to provide some historical
That's exactly
context.
what you said before.
So previously in the IBJJF, or just jiu-jitsu, there were not that many women doing this sport. You know, there's pioneers, but like the divisions are not that rich. It's very hard to make a division. That's the problem that Matt mentioned with the kids. Is like you have the age, then you have the belt, and then you have the weight, and like it thins out to be a division of one. So previously, the IBJJF was brown and black belt women together, limited weight categories. So there wasn't rooster weight, there wasn't super heavy. It was very limited, brown and black together. So that was the solution. So year by year, as it's come along, the IBJJF, you know, they finally made it. The black belts compete against black belts. The brown belts compete against brown belts. There's more weight classes. They debuted the rooster weight final. I think I commentated the first rooster weight black belt female final, which was 2 girls. They defaulted into the final, which is kind of what they wanted to avoid. You know, that kind of, you know, thing where they want people to like earn their way into it, or heaven forbid somebody shows up and just wins by default. They want to avoid that. So they are making progress. So you have to place that in its context. It's like PED testing. It's like, okay, rewind 10 years ago here. Look at how much they've expanded this thing. They are expanding year by year. They can't just test every athlete. Like, relax. They are expanding every year. The PED testing, it's expensive. It costs money and resources. So anyways, that's what's happened in the women's division. That said, there is enough women in the super heavy, true super heavy, and true ultra heavyweight category to make these divisions. They should be making these divisions. So, like, I have a student that's a true heavyweight competing. She took double silver in the adult category at World Championships, and like brown belt. Sorry, so that's like a very big accomplishment on a gym level basis. And she's competing against, there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying like there's anything wrong with the girls. It's just like a different weight class. It's a different weight class. So that's something that needs
She has no choice. I mean, it's just the way the system's been set up, and it needs to be changed.
Yeah, and there's enough. If there wasn't enough and there was nobody would be nobody in these divisions, then okay, I kind of get it. But there's enough in these categories. You look here, you know, there's at least 4, 5, 6 girls that can make it up in that division, and there's enough here. Make it. So that's my real answer.
It's a really common problem across combat sports, generally speaking. Like in the UFC, women can't weigh more than 155 pounds.
Yeah, but Dana's been so misogynistic, like towards girls in the past. Like it's been really bad. And then Ronda Rousey changed his mind, and he's flip flopping and closing divisions when the star. Dana's does not have the greatest track record for advocating for female athletes. Let's just say, Dana advocates for money. But I feel that like that is the first thing that flashes, and it's similar things along that line that need changing and reform. But those are playing with the system. And I sense in your question that there is a inherent like the system is wrong, Dan. Like tell us what you'd change about it.
Well,
like there's a little bit of that.
Flip-flopped a little on this.
No, hang on. So in his question, so I said I'd answer the question. So that's the first thing that.
Yeah, there was it was a little bit of a charged question,
yes.
like the system.
Yes, it
is
was
wrong.
a charged question. So one thing that you said, and I don't remember exactly the question, was that a lot of people complain about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're generally idiots. Like, again, they generally have no idea what they're talking about. They'll say things like, "Oh, the referee just gave him the Brazilian advantage at the end because he wanted the other guy to win and me to lose." That's a common one. And we watched a match like this. I love it. By the way, okay, I love one of my favorite pastimes. I'm telling you, this is awesome. It's when I go online after the big tournaments and somebody complains that IBJJF screwed me, this, that, and the other thing. Now we have flow grappling. I love going on flow grappling and actually watching the match. And I'm telling you, 90% of the time, I'm just making that number up, but 90% of the time, it's not the IBJJF screwing them. It's that athlete not knowing what the heck's going on. 90% of the time. So a ton of this sentiment is from butthurt people who lost their match, and they really don't understand why they lost the match. Yeah. One thing, the IBJJF has faults, but it's not usually in the faults that people are criticizing them for. Yes, they are rigid, they are slow to adapt, and things of this nature. But the reason that the high-level people gravitate towards the IBJJF is because it's consistent. It's the same thing. Everything in our jiu-jitsu is a double-edged sword. If you have good persistence, you're too stubborn. That's the case of Matt Grant. It's a double-edged sword. Those are the same attributes of the same thing, just one viewed through a positive, one viewed through a negative. And that's an example of one, is the IBJJF is rigid, slow, but they are extremely professional. And when you sign up for an event, you are kind of like relinquishing your control over the whole thing to this organization. Is this organization going to change brackets at the last second? Can you imagine at the Olympics? You're at the Olympics and you have a bracket for wrestling, and you get to the Olympics and they're like, "Oh, we're going to redo all the brackets now." I mean, that's crazy to think about in that context, because we all have watched the Olympics. I'm not equating the IBJJF with the Olympics. I'm just giving an example of things like changing the brackets, shifting around. You're not quite sure if the person actually made weight or not. Like, I just did the Jiu-Jitsu World League, the Worlds, and there were 2 no-shows in the division. So they redid all the brackets right then and there. Like, this super, super unprofessional. So there's a lot of things like this. The referees are the most highly trained referees in our sport. You can't just throw out a random purple or brown belt who does jiu-jitsu, they know jiu-jitsu, and expect them to be a competent referee. I mean, they'll get close, but refereeing is an art form that you need to practice just as much as jiu-jitsu, and you need to hone your craft. And the refereeing courses that they have, the review process that they have internally to weed out not bad actors, but just underperforming referees, is not like, they're not perfect, but it's better than anybody in the sport. And they do it at a scale that's well beyond what like NABJJF or Jiu-Jitsu World League needs to do. They'll have a match or tournament simultaneously in Ireland, New York, Los Angeles, and Brazil on the same day. The scale of doing that really proves, or doesn't prove, it's evidence to show that their system is by and large the best. The only time I really see them strained on a referee basis is at Masters Worlds, because they have goodness. It's not just Masters Worlds. They have the Jiu-Jitsu con at the same time.
They're running like 36 mats.
They have the kids going on at the same time. It's more than 36. And you can imagine
36 is a lot.
To put out like 50 referees that are competent. Like, there are tournaments here that struggle with putting 8 on their 8 in their high school gymnasium, 8 qualified referees. Usually there's like 3 and like 4 or 5 kind of like mediocre ones.
Yeah.
So the IBJJF is rigid, but at the same time, you know exactly what to expect. There's no let's contrast this. That was an experience with Jiu-Jitsu World League. Let's contrast this with ADCC. Like, IBJJF has extremely concrete written down rules as what happens when you go out of bounds. When you go out of bounds, you know exactly what to expect. How far out of bounds? Are you on the safety area? How much of the safety area? Is there a submission in a play? Is it stable position or is it not a stable position? In the ADCC, they don't even have a safety area. They just go off into the concrete. They don't really know what they're going to do. They just say, we're not really going to stop submissions. So then you're going into the chairs and you're going into like the audience member, the camera person that's there. You're moving out of the way just so they can keep going with the submission. People can get seriously injured in this stuff. These are the types of things that you relinquish. And it's everywhere. It's in the macro, it's in the micro. When you compete for an organization that quite honestly is not professional. ADCC has brand recognition. It has prestige, but it's not professional as far as like an organization putting on tournaments. Is extremely unprofessional. I mean, even just the conduct of the referees is extremely unprofessional. They're like, yeah, get the guy to cheer, give him a hand, all this stuff. It's like, it's freaking like an underground rave or something. This kind of reminds me of. But, so, the IBJJF rule set is the most clear rule set in jiu-jitsu. And even being the clearest rule set with a rule book that is fairly comprehensive, they still receive legitimate criticism about situations which are not fully clarified. And it's so funny because the legitimate criticism that they get is like so far beyond what everybody else is doing as far as like their consistency of their approach, their rule book being well developed and earned. Like, what is Jiu-Jitsu World? You guys saw just the other day, the competitor wanted to, was in a triangle, ran over to the side and slammed the guy into the table. That's probably Jiu-Jitsu World League's first time dealing with that situation. And Matt talked to the referee, right? Yeah, afterwards. And he's like, maybe I should have done, like this or that when I saw it. Like he's kind of clarifying, the organization's kind of figuring out what they want to do with this. Like in the IBJJF, all that type of stuff is already figured out because they've already been there before. Yeah. These rules are rules, almost all of them through kind of like fake blood. Like they've earned it through doing it wrong and then fixing it the next time. And all these other organizations are just doing, I go to tournaments all the time and I have been for almost 2 decades. And it's just like when I see like the amateurism of the tournaments that I go to build experience for my competitors and the non-IBJJF ones, it sticks out so much. It doesn't stick out to them because they don't know any better. It doesn't stick out to the white belt and the blue belt as much. But somebody who does tournaments every weekend and they do it for a living, basically, you realize what you give up outside of the IBJJF. You give up all the security and the stability of the organization.
What is that? I know you had NABJJ. What's the other? What's it called?
It's the same thing.
I know, but you know
SIJJF.
They're big in China.
SIJJF.
The
Sport Jiu-Jitsu International
Federation. Okay. And so we were at a tournament in Riverside, and I had one of my athletes that was there, and another athlete got choked out unconscious. So they told my
safety issues too.
So they told my athlete that he won. My athlete was not the one that choked him out. He was on the other side of the bracket. He was to go into the 3rd, 4th place. So they said, okay, you know what? He passed out. He didn't. You don't have to fight him because we're not going to fight somebody that passed out. And then my athlete went to the podium with the other one, and then the referee came back and get him and said, oh, we changed our mind. The other coach said he can go, so come back and fight him. After he was already on the podium.
So here's what Matt is tapping into. I like to do this to Matt. Matt has his comments, and I'm like, all right, let's bring this into perspective a little bit.
And I could
a lot of tournaments.
Every organization, with the exception of IBJJF, they have a rule, and they hold firm.
And that's going to piss some people off. That will piss people off. And then there's most of them who just don't understand. Right. There's that. Right. And then there's the legitimate criticisms. And those all get mixed up into a jumble. And It
was just like last week at American Nationals, 2 friends of ours got in a head slapping match. A little bit hard neckties.
Black belt
Black
division.
belt
You can say their
division.
names. They're black belts. They're public figures.
It's
Go
okay.
ahead.
It's
Elton Jose versus Francisco Lowe.
And Francisco Lowe, Helton trains here often. Francisco Lowe trains with my grandkids.
We're connected with Francisco as well.
Because it was Cicero Acosta group. And so the thing is, they pulled him, they DQ'd both of them very quickly. And not only did they DQ them, they took away their wins in their division. So instead of winning the division, Francisco, they have first place and 2/3. They moved the guy that he beat up to first, 2/3, he's out. That's something that they've done before. They're going to do it again. It's the consequences of the rule. There's no debate. It's just the way it is. But in these other organizations, my grandkid showed up and there was, and he won this is a couple tournaments ago in Jiu-Jitsu World League, and he won his first match, and then he came off and they said, well, you know what, we're going to redo the brackets. That doesn't count. So you're going to have to fight different people because a big gym had too many of its kids on the same side of the bracket and they didn't like it.
You don't get all this nonsense in there.
And it's just, and so then he had to go and he had to beat another kid just to get to the same spot he would have been in the tournament. I mean, he actually did well in the tournament. I think he won the tournament. But the thing is, they just, a friend of mine, and I mean, it plays to our favor too. A friend of mine, they were going down to Houston to a Jiu-Jitsu World League, or I'm pretty sure it was Jiu-Jitsu World League. And he said, hey, can we, my daughter said to his wife, you guys signed up for the tournament? And they said, oh no, we missed the deadline. And the husband says, well, let me see. So they called up the organizers, and the organizers said, well, if you pay extra, we can get you in. So they paid the extra, like a day before, drove down to Houston. It's, I don't know how far it is from Dallas to Houston, 3-4 hours. Drove down with my daughter and grandkids. Their daughter, they drove down together, and she was in the tournament. And then she fought, and she might have won. There's so many tournaments, who can keep track of who wins and loses. But the thing is that stuff never happens. They say it's by 5:00 today, this has to be done. By 5:00 on the time of the tournament. So if that's in Orlando, that means that has to be done by 2:00 here. So they're very rigid, but they're very consistent. Okay. And I think in the end, all you want from a referee, whether it's any sport, is consistency. And so many people I fight with, I come off and they ask me, well, how did I get that advantage?
Yeah, they don't
well,
even
how
know.
did you get that? Know. I mean, Dan and I were watching a match at American Internationals 2 years ago when it was in Anaheim, and the guy came over and he won by an advantage, and Dan said to him, do you know how you got that advantage? And he made up something, and Dan said, no, that's not how you got it. And this is a black belt who won, who's pretty well recognized. And
black belt, adult. It
was a master's division. But the thing is, and that's just not uncommon. People have no idea.
Shout out Mustafa.
No, I'm not saying any names because I love everybody. Dan, he's controversial. Me, I love everybody. But the thing is how you're putting. Think about any other sport. What sport would you let people go out and say, okay, you're going to compete for 5 minutes, and at the end, I know you don't really understand the rules, so at the end, we're going to just tell you who won. And that's what's happening at most of these IBJJF tournaments. And those are the people who are complaining that it's a Brazilian bias, because the Brazilians know. Because when I went to Brazilian Nationals...
Okay, this is an important point. Brazilians know the rules.
The Brazilians know the rules.
That's
when I went to Brazilian Nationals...
Got to address the psyche of why we don't want to do that.
They were there, and the whole stand knew everything that was going on. They knew the advantages. And it's like a basketball game or a football game or a baseball game in the U.S. and everybody boos the referee because they think they didn't make a good call. Have you ever heard anybody boo a referee, a jiu-jitsu referee in the U.S.? No, because they don't even know.
They don't even know how to boo. They don't know how to boo or when to boo.
How are they going to boo? What do you mean you gave him an advantage for that? Oh,
the coach sometimes does.
Right? Well, right. But not the athletes. But not the whole crowd. The whole crowd. And in Brazilian nationals, that was one of the things that amazed me most was how engaged they were and how they knew even the people that weren't doing jujitsu, the wives, the girlfriends, just the people in the stands that weren't regular practitioners, they knew what the rules were. They knew when there was a bad call.
There is a whole bunch of reasons for this. And the reasons ultimately come down to how the sport came to the United States. It really does. And we're still to this day suffering the lingering consequences of why and how it came to the United States. And where it essentially boils down to we're unwilling to adopt the psyche to learn the rules in the sport that we're competing in. I can see many people listening. You're like, oh, they're talking about advantages. They're just hunting for advantages. Tell me, there are a few advantages like double pulling up, which are like unskilled advantages. Unskilled, there is a skill to that too, but not as much. But like, tell me, when are you not going to hold your guard pass? Instead, try and get an advantage over that. You're not going to. Yes. You're not going to one hook for an advantage. I'm not going to get my 4 points. I'll just do the advantage instead. Like it's ludicrous. There is looking for advantages, but most of the time it's like you wish you could have got those points, and
I think the problem comes back to I think the individual athlete would like to understand the rules. They just don't want to take the time to understand the rules.
But also,
and so they set up for a competition without really understanding, and their professors, their instructors don't understand the rules, so they can't teach them the rules.
We're speaking out of experience. Like, we know a lot of people between the two of us, and when we say that they don't understand the rules, they don't understand the rules. Like, we're not going to name names, but they don't understand the rules. They get the kind of like the general gist of it, for sure. But when it comes to like, if you understand the nuance of the rules, the action is self-explanatory, what you need to do in the position. It's self-explanatory. And that really comes, the more fine the rule is that you're looking at, the more self-explanatory it is. Because it's just like, oh, just don't put your hand, just get up like this or instead of like that or whatever. It's like a pretty easy consequence. But what Matt was tapping into earlier that I wanted to distill for you is that other organizations are led by well-intentioned people who operate in what I call the spirit of the martial art. So, like, for example, I give an example of ADCC going out of bounds and just like clearing the chairs out and just into the table, move away, things like that. That is what I call the spirit of the martial art. And I recognize this from when I started, because a lot of these tournaments were run in, you had your basic rules, 2 points for this, 2 points for this, 3 points for that, 4 points for that. All right, ready to go. And it was just like you kind of filled in the gaps with the spirit of what was intended. So like the spirit is like we're trying to work for a submission. And if it's going out of bounds, just clear it out of the way and let them keep going. Let them figure it out. That's what I call it, like the spirit of the martial arts. And most people have not had the experience of running a tournament. And when you run a tournament, you're faced with all sorts of, oh, my son missed weight. Can you get him into this division? Please, please, please. We drove from 6 hours away. We flew in here. We spent $2,000. You're faced with that literally every 5 minutes. You're faced with people trying to also maliciously bend the rules. You're faced with the sincere and the malicious. And there are tournaments that kind of like just cave into that because they're trying to do the right thing. Oh, you spent all this money to come here. You just missed by half a pound. All right, we'll put you in the other division. And what does that mean? It means that things like what we were just saying happen. It's like, oh, the brackets get changed. You were expecting such and such matches. Now it's an additional match against a different athlete where...
Now there's inconsistency.
Yeah. Inconsistency.
Yes. So, yes. The spirit of the rules is, or the spirit of the martial art is one of the things that we need to get away from. Because the whole out of bounds example, that's been tried different ways through time. This is not a new thing. We've gone through many decades of like, what do you do when somebody has a submission when you go out of bounds? And the things that have been tried are let them keep going. There's injury risk with let them keep going when you go outside of the mats. I mean, that's the primary one. There is also resetting in the middle. And when you try and reset a submission in the middle, it's never the same. You either have it better or you have it worse than you had it before. I mean, people have tried this, and the rules being the way that they are for situations like that. And there's 3 ways that can be submission out of bounds. Most people don't even know this. Let me give an example. Let's see if you can test your knowledge, is see if you know the 3 ways to go out of bounds. But the 2 points, which is the way that's awarded, or people conceive that it's awarded most of the time, is as a result of on balance, what is the best thing to do in this kind of crummy situation that we need to deal with? Because the others have massive problems. Just letting them go out of bounds into the chairs, into the stands, just let them keep going. Well, if you let them keep going, how far do you let them keep going? What if they roll 6 more times and they keep going, and they keep going literally into into the chairs of the audience? Yeah, into the street. At what point do you cut it off?
In the streets.
And then whatever point that you decide is too far, then you've made a rule around it. And that's kind of what the IBJJF has criticized a little bit for. So let's see. Test the knowledge. There's 3 ways that submission out of bounds can be scored. Most people are familiar with 2 of the 3. One, it depends on who is initiating. One is if you're attacking a submission, let's say an ankle lock, and the guy does a logical defense, a logical movement that ends out of bounds. That will be 2 points for the person applying the submission, and we restart from stand up. Because that's, the best of a bad situation, in my opinion. If you want to do it with your organization, I think you're opening up yourself for lawsuits, like ADCC, lawsuit city for me.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. In a number of different ways. Jiu-jitsu people aren't the type to sue, but like the submission out of bounds, this is straight up dangerous. Some of these professional events doing ADCC did it one time, where you're up on the stage and you're not. Yeah, the platform, and there's no crash pads underneath. Dude, I'd sue you. I'd tell my students to sue you. If you fell off that, suffered a debilitating injury, which ended your career, for sure. I'd sue for millions and millions of dollars. And I'd get Hannah Gracie to testify. That's good. Situation number 2 is the opponent goes out of bounds through a non-logical defense. So he's just getting out of bounds just to get the submission out of bounds. It's not a logical.
Fleeing the mat.
Yep. Then that's a disqualification, as it should be, because it depends. How did it get out of bounds? Because this is all earned through blood. I'm using blood as an analogy, not literal blood.
Right.
Well, sometimes, actually, yes. Because if the guy realizes that it's going to be reset if he gets out of bounds, then he does like some stupid movement to just yank himself out of bounds. He could take advantage of that. So they go, okay, that's a disqualification. And the third, which is where the most sour feelings occur in this situation. This is just one of dozens, if not hundreds, of situations that are outlined. Is you have a submission out of bounds, or submission near the boundary, and you, the attacker, are the one through a logical movement takes it out of bounds. You initiated it out of bounds. And in this case, it's not 2 points. This is where everybody gets really sour feelings. And if you initiated it, it's stand up, reset in the middle, and if the submission was good enough per the normal submission, near submission, like there's a real chance of him tapping, you get 1 advantage. So that's in situations like that, replicated all over the course of the map, is where you get, the guy was Brazilian or he's from a major team and he just screwed me. No, let's go watch the video. You had the ankle lock and you made the initiation to roll out of bounds. It wasn't him. You can see it clear as day. So these are the types of things that I find that are the most sour feelings from. So having this type of structure, especially if you're like when you get up in the ranks and people are actually watching you and your livelihood depends on this outcome, and you're selling hundreds of thousands of dollars of DVDs or instructionals in some of these cases, or your academy, your prestige is riding on this, you do not want to throw it into the hands of, let's just go with the spirit of the sport. You don't know what the spirit of the sport is going to be, but let's just go with the spirit of the sport. And so in a nutshell, that's why I appreciate the rigidity and the structure of the IBJJF. And I would encourage people to, when they hear complaints, do digging. It's actually a really fun hobby. Do digging and see if they're actually full of it. And like the phantom advantage at the end. That's one that gets a lot of people. So the match ends and then they award an advantage. It's like, for crying out loud, that advantage has been loaded in that position for the full minute. And because they don't want advantage mining, then they wait until the situation resolves, and in this case, the match ended, and then they award the advantage. But you as the athlete need to know that that advantage is in there because they want to see if you're going to pass or not. What I'm talking about, of course, is establishing the half guard advantage. That one really has a lot of sour feelings.
And you know, and I know Dan said this, and so he might accuse me of mansplaining here, but
I'm a man.
But the thing is
you can't mansplain a man.
I think you can.
So you're saying you're more a man than me? All right, let's roll on.
So I think, if you have one hook in,
Ramsey, you better split this into 6 parts or something.
If you have one hook in, you're going to get an advantage. They're not going to give you the advantage until the position has cleared itself or whatever. Because if you put both,
they don't want to give you an advantage and 4 points. They want you either to get the advantage or 4 points because they don't want you mining advantages.
So if you have that hook in and you just never get in, and so you're kind of riding the guy's hip, and then the match ends, then they give you the advantage.
Right.
Then all of a sudden they're like, wait. They haven't moved for 3 minutes. Or, like you said, with the half guard underhook. I mean, there are certain positions that inherently are going to get an advantage. But if those positions never progress, if they progress to points, no advantage is given. So they're not going to give the advantage.
You're not going to have your cake and eat it too.
Right.
And this is one that on an amateur level, when people are complaining, this is like amateur level complaints. This is one that is a constant theme.
Because they just don't understand the rules.
Yeah, I would say when I started competing in jiu-jitsu, I got disqualified from my first six tournaments because I didn't know the rules at all.
So you should self-reflect on why did I not take the time to learn the rules? I signed up for the competition.
Yeah. So what I did after wasting all of this time and money entering these tournaments, I was just instantly disqualified for silly little things that were completely avoidable. I did the unthinkable and I read the entire rule book, and I was like, man, this thing is long and nuanced and detailed, and I ended up winning 2 gold medals in my next match. It was like such a stark contrast from absolutely nothing, just being the worst jiu-jitsu competitor ever, to being able to win. But at the same time, advantage points, I don't really understand advantage points. I'll be very upfront about that. That's like the part of the rule book that is probably the most important, since there are so many matches.
Right.
Every match I have lost since has been via advantage point. Every single one of them.
So let's talk about this, because like I said with the submission out of bounds, you're trying to deal with an imperfect scenario, which is what do you do with this crummy situation? We're off the mat now and the guy has a submission. And in this case, what is the meat of what you're trying to accomplish here? The meat of what you're trying to accomplish is, what the heck do you do when the score is even? That is the ultimate crux of what you're going into. Well, the first thing that you could do, which is what many organizations do, is just have a referee decision. Well, when you have the referee decision, you introduce all the possibility of subjectivity. I mean, there are things in the IBJJF that are subjective. It's not like a subjective free thing. You're making a judgment call on some stuff using your experience. But you're trying to take a subjective impression of the match in its totality. So what types of things do you value? And at what ratio do you value them? Well, you are basically doing advantages without actually scoring the advantages in that case. Or one referee will have one criteria. Maybe he values that ankle lock more than you two guard passes. So with advantages, you can set some objective or more objective criteria to form the basis of effectively what amounts to a referee decision in that case. Another way that organizations like to do it is they do sudden death overtime. So that's one that organizations, how they deal with no advantages. And
yeah, you'll see that in catch wrestling, for example.
Yeah. So the
thing about sudden death overtime, though, is now you've changed the dynamic.
100%. People like me can definitely start to come up. If I have better cardio than the guy, focus on my cardio. This is simple level strategy. This is not advanced. I could just basically aim to make it even at the end and then get him in overtime because I know he doesn't have cardio. So now I'm looking to take it into a grueling, because points are hard. at the high level. I can take it into a 30, 40-minute match just to win this match. And that might be my strategy against some people with some dynamics. It's just take it into a marathon. I know you'll win a marathon. Take it into a marathon. I know he will not be able to keep up. Just don't get scored on the entire time. If you pull guard, there's some people whose guard that you can't pass in an hour. I'm telling you. I train with them, and often. Like if you're rolling with Pato, for example, let's see, we have no problem using names in the positive. If you're rolling with Pato, you will not pass his guard in an hour. Like you're gonna need to like get him going for like 4 hours before he gets like tired. And
even if you do talk to him,
Pato is not the most conversationalist.
He talks to me.
I mean, talks, yes.
But the thing is most of the time when it goes into sudden death overtime, most close matches are like 0-0.
Yeah, and they cancel out for the next 20 minutes.
Neither of them can score. Yeah. See, my big question, and I had this question over the weekend.
We're going to get distracted off of this.
No, this
advantages.
is advantages.
Let's hone it back on advantages if we get too far.
This is on advantages. So when in a black belt adult match, those matches are 10 minutes long. Does the referee, he's refereed all day long. Does he start at the first minute thinking this might go to referee's decision? I have to watch.
They're skilled. They know how to do this.
Yes, maybe. Do they have that amount of focus? Do they remember it? But if they can assign advantages for almost, and I know that's not, Dan's going to correct me.
Yes.
If they can assign advantages.
That's the way that's described.
For the positions that gain advantages.
He's making the wordage okay with me.
I
give lectures on all
I'm trying to pacify Dan. But the thing is if they do that from the start, then they've basically said who won the referee's decision at the end by just looking at the scorecard. Do you referee boxing?
Yeah.
So you referee boxing. So you have a scorecard. Mm-hmm. Nobody sees the scorecard. Right? I mean, until the end of the match.
Yeah, so we've got three judges. They're keeping score of each round.
There's not something up on the screen that shows what this... But basically, You're giving advantages. You're giving advantages for either certain types of punch, hitting with certain parts of the glove, and either correct me if I'm wrong or don't, because I'm pretty sure I'm wrong.
Probably keep some degree of mental tally. Okay.
Well, this is where other combat sports are different than jiu-jitsu, because the referee doesn't have anything to do with the scoring. They just make sure the fighters don't kill each other, basically.
Yeah, well, that's the referee.
Referee from judge.
You're right, referee from judge. That's a good point. But see, my point being is it's kind of the same thing in that now they have these judges that are basically not showing it up there. And so, it can be a little bit up to interpretation of the viewer to know if they felt like, that decision went the correct way. But if they look at the scorecard and if there was definite, like, okay, like in the Olympics, you get them with this color part of your glove, you get more points than with this part of your glove.
Well, in Olympic boxing, you'll only score if you connect with the white part of the glove, the one at the end, the end of the fist.
Okay, but anyway, so
Matt doesn't know.
You understand what I'm saying, and so all I'm saying is it's a, it's just a better system. The worst system, which I didn't think was the worst system until just last weekend when my grandson lost because the last to score wins, is Jiu-Jitsu World League.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
To say the winner is the last
they
to
still
score
have,
wins.
Yeah. So this is hang on. Let me go here. Let's bring this back on track. Okay. I wanted to, that's what I have to do with Matt. One is you have a decision, and that decision you're taking certain things into account, and people can do it differently at different ratios. And so there's an inconsistent result as far as like this referee values top position more, this referee valued a near sweep more. You can put objective criteria on the smaller things to where it's defined for everybody. You know exactly what they're going to get. So it's basically a ref decision that's not a ref decision. So that's the problem with just a ref decision. The problem with sudden death overtime is that they go so freaking long, and you're going to turn it into a war of attrition. And that's a dynamic that you can start to game. And just on a practical level as well, running a tournament like that, where matches will just plug up the whole tournament for 40 minutes. I mean, it will go more than 40 minutes. Or a big problem is just on a logistic level. The third is, and this was an attempt to kind of take away the decision, because people don't like decisions either. They don't like decisions probably less than advantages sometimes, is then you have EBI overtime rules. EBI overtime rules are, in my opinion, the worst. So the way that Eddie describes it, it's like a soccer shootout. You know, you just get to do that. But EBI overtime rules are the easiest to game. And now everybody's kind of caught on to this fact. But especially if there's a skill discrepancy between you and them, they are better than you, you can just aim to not get submitted. And it's like only a few minutes, and it's no-gi. Like, that's really hard to submit somebody in a few minutes, no-gi, especially at a high level. And you can just aim to take it into overtime and just escape the back quickly, and you're the winner. And they didn't even earn this back thing. That's like the worst solution of it all, in my opinion. At least as a practitioner, I won't make any comment as a viewer. I don't like it as a viewer. I appreciate the smaller things of high-level jiu-jitsu, and they are going to start to narrow. If you want to watch mismatches, I guess, like the bourgeoisie, or how do you say that? They might like that. The popular people, the great unwashed, they might like that. But I don't like that. It's not fun to watch like Hoffa Mendes go to Japan and just breakdance on people's backs. Like I can do that too. It's
entertaining.
Yeah, that overtime.
It's entertaining and like so. Anyways, but that where you didn't earn this position and you never would have gotten it. I really don't like that. And I think a lot of top athletes were going to have a lot of trouble with that. And that's why it's never going to catch on. It will catch on. There's a niche for it. I'm saying there is a niche for it. But as far as like all the top competitors moving over to this is the solution for an even match, it's not going to happen. So like, and then you get some other types of creative things, but they all have their own issues. And there's the surface layer issues, and then there's the downstream consequences. The downstream consequences be like, people like me will be like, how do we take advantage of this type of situation so we can best position you for success? So I really do like advantages. Because they are an objective thing. They're written down. Everybody knows what they are. So not only can I fight, I don't want to say fight for them, because that's not really what you do. Some of the time you are at the very, very high level.
Like you'll recognize them and capitalize on them.
Or that they're trying to get an advantage on me. Most likely, the ones that are the most probably subject to criticism on advantage mining are not most of them. It's the ankle lock and the toe hold. Because especially at the lower levels, this isn't true at the higher levels as much. In the lower level, it's very hard to generate the amount of force necessary to submit a flexible person, because the ratio of strength to arm to flexibility of the foot is not favorable for the person doing the submission at the lower belt levels, the lower weight categories. That's not true at the higher weight categories, where, you know, if like Bushesha gets a hold of your foot falls off. You know, like you get an ultra heavy doing an ankle lock, your shin can freaking explode. Like there's a certain level of that. But that's probably one of the primary ones. Like, oh shoot, I'm down by advantages, I have to get on to a toe hold or something like that. And it actually, for me, is an actually interesting dynamic. And people forget that these are real submissions, that they are close. It's not like he's only going for the advantage. He's going to rip your foot off if he can. Like, they're painful. You'll be limping afterwards. You're telling me that it wasn't worth anything? His ankle's this big. What tournament was it? Oh yeah, it was Vitor Estima and Leandro Lowe. Estima got him in the sock lock, the Estima lock. Oh, yeah. And, you know, they rolled a little bit and he got out of it. He got the advantage. Freaking after that tournament, Leandro could not walk. And there he is, mining the advantages again, taking advantage. Dude, he almost freaking ripped his foot off. Like, people don't understand. They see, like they see the calm face. They see that he got an advantage, and you don't see the aftermath. Look at freaking Joao's ankles. Man, when Joao was here, when he was here, he was after like Texas. And he did, this was his last open weight, I think, that I saw him do anyway. When he gets an ultra heavy, he was barren bullying the guy, and the guy countered with a toe hold, which he obviously doesn't tap to, and he's not going to. But by golly, that foot was one of the worst times I've seen Joel's foot been put in there. As he comes here like a week later, his freaking ankle
At
was
least a softball.
yeah, it was so big, and it looked like he was just hurting with every step because like who knows what his other leg had been through, but every step looked like it hurt. Like these are not just like nothing things,
Like
and those are the advantages that people criticize the most. I would say
Really?
those would be the advantages that I would say like, oh shoot, you're down by an advantage. What's the easiest advantage to do? Go for a toe hold if you're brown or black belt, ankle lock if you're less than that. So yeah, it's very important to understand the advantages. And I promise you probably have some misconception on how the advantages work.
Oh, definitely.
For sure. The easiest way that catches most advantages is most, but not all, is get to a point scoring position, but you can't hold it for 3 seconds. That's
okay.
Yeah, get to a point scoring position. You take them down, you couldn't hold it for 3 seconds. Okay? Or you pass their guard, couldn't hold it for 3 seconds. Or you swept them, couldn't hold them down for 3 seconds. That's the way that most advantages are scored. And then you have some special circumstances, like the double pulling up, which is a great advantage. I love that advantage. Easiest advantage to get in jiu-jitsu. You both pull guard at the same time. You do not want to see people doing this the whole match. So they've put a whole bunch of new rules. And one is a small incentive to get on top. They can incentivize that behavior. That's the easiest one to get. We're double pulling up. Now we're doing jiu-jitsu instead of like playing footsie with each other, which is hard to do anyway because you only have 20 seconds. Or there's penalties they accrue and they start you over and you both get DQ'd eventually.
Right.
So yeah. So in summary, I think that advantages are the best but imperfect solution to a situation. I mean, we've tried all of this. And the worst one, as Matt alluded to, because I didn't mention it, is Jiu-Jitsu World League has last to score is the winner. And this is just so terrible. On the surface level, you can say you could be winning the whole match. You know, you're passing the guard, you sweep him, okay? You're passing the guard, he's smashed, he's in terrible positions, and at the last minute, he does a sweep. You were in control for most of the match. It was very clear that he was barely hanging on. He was in the corner guard, getting smashed, almost got mount a few times. No advantages, right? He got the mount, he fished it up, he got the mount again, nearly took the back, stayed on top, back smash on the half guard, and at the last minute, he did a sweep. He's the automatic winner. And that is to remove the subjectivity out of it, just like advantages are designed to do. And then that's surface level nonsense where you have these matches where you're dominant, and you lose the match. It would be like no question. Any average person watching it would be like, yeah, for sure you won. And then there's the under level. And the under level is it punishes guard pullers. Like, so if you're a guard puller, you're always at a disadvantage because you pull the guard and then you sweep, you're up 2, now you can only lose the match. Because if the guy sweeps you, he's the winner. So there's always
tie it up, but he would be the last to score.
Yeah, you'd be the last to score. So yeah, it's always going to be a disadvantage to the guard puller because he can only lose the match after he sweeps and completes the sweep. So there's like, and then it gets even more nuanced beyond that. But there's always the surface level, and then there's the under level. And people like me pick up on it very, very quickly, and will hone in on it. Whatever the weakness is. And there's weaknesses to all of them, but the advantages are probably the best way to deal and eliminate as many decisions as you can.
Interesting. So, Dan, what did you think of Matt's idea about awarding points for the crucifix position?
I wasn't even listening. So this is a common one. The crucifix particular, you'll read about this one. This is a common.
Or if not that, just like
let me explain what Matt is tapping into with the crucifix. Matt is tapping into a sentiment of the points were originally designed to be centered around positions which are effective in a fighting scenario. And on a base level, it's true. Like mount is good, back is good, like this.
For sure.
And then as the sport has evolved and our understanding of good positions in the fight through high-level mixed martial arts and its evolution has changed slightly. So what Matt is tapping into is crucifix is a dominant fight ending position. Both the top crucifix, like he was thinking like crucifix proper, like Barrett Yoshida style crucifix, like where you're laying on your back.
Definitely.
But there's also like crucifix. People have argued this for crucifix and top side control, where you've pinned this arm, you've pinned that arm, and you can just deliver elbows to the face. So the argument here is to bring the sport more back to its fighting roots. Okay. if you want to make a rule change to where you want it to be the most applicable to fighting, which is the highest level of which is MMA, then it's simple. You penalize guard pulls -2. You can't pull guard. It's just a takedown. That's the reality. The reality of what everything has taught us is that at the high level, you need to be on top. For a high level mixed martial arts bout. That's not true for self-defense. I would wreck somebody that got in a fight with me and I was on the bottom. I could pull guard and easily handle myself against even a large athletic person. It's not a big deal. Most of the time, there's no certainties in things, but like most likely I'd be more than fine. So for me, the art, so that was the original intent, and it was. And the art evolved, and that intent kind of changes. But in the meantime, we've launched a rich competitive sport. Right. And the way that I see it is that if I'm going to play Monopoly, I'm not going to question why you get $200 for pass and go. Why is it not $1,000? Why is it not $100?
In other words,
it's just freaking it.
BJJ does not need to be MMA. Doesn't need to be.
No, it doesn't need to be. Well, if you want MMA, just go to MMA, and it's close enough. It'll give you a good base. Wrestling is close enough. There's so much about wrestling that's so stupid for self-defense. It's so stupid, but wrestlers make great people for MMA because of A, the mentality, B, the focus on takedowns, which dictates where the fight goes, and literally like most of the stuff that they learn is junk. Like technique-wise, on a technical level, like all the groundwork, not all of it. Some of it is good for like some of it is good for control and delivering strikes, but I was just close enough to where if you wanted to go into MMA, you learn jiu-jitsu, competitive jiu-jitsu for what it is. You learn wrestling for what it is. You learn Muay Thai for what it is, and you shut up for 6 years, and then you combine them after 6 years. That's the best way to do it. Proficiency in each, pare away what is not needed. Not only taking what is fight applicable and only learning that, because there's so much stuff that could work, but just is not likely to work, or you're not likely to encounter those positions on a regular basis. And it doesn't make so much sense investing all this time into developing this position that you'll encounter one every 30 fights. It makes more sense to learn how to defend punches in the close guard, how to stand up using the cage, protect your back as they try and take your back as you stand up, and get the heck up and strike with them and then take them down.
Well, and as far as the crucifix goes,
the crucifix taps into this sentiment of let's make our martial art more like fighting. Dude, just let it be what it is.
Right. That is, the rules are the rules.
Yeah. That's why my Monopoly are the rules. You don't argue about in chess, white goes first and black goes second.
If you go to Singapore, you can't chew gum. And so
that's the way it is.
If you like to chew gum, then don't go to Singapore.
Yeah. Just do MMA.
Don't complain. Don't tell the people at Singapore to change the rules. And now, well, I really want to chew gum. Singapore, you need to change your rules. Then you just
does anybody question why the knight can jump over pieces and the other people don't? I mean, I'm sure there was a reason. Like knights,
good question.
Horses can't jump over people.
And the knights were originally elephants in the old.
And even before that, they were elephants. Before elephants, they were another thing too.
And elephants even do less jumping than horses.
Yeah. So it's like, why is the king so impotent? Like it's just the way the king moves. Just learn the game. Yeah. Like it's going to teach you logic. And in this case, logic is a placeholder for self-defense. Like the game of chess will teach you logic. And it'll teach you how to think logically, think critically. It'll teach you memorization skills, and it'll increase you like your core elements there. Jiu-jitsu is going to have you under any circumstance that you could possibly imagine. Focusing on competitive jiu-jitsu will enable you to defend yourself, your family, from all conceivable scenarios that you could potentially defend yourself against. It's not going to defend yourself against a gun or a knife effectively or something like that. And if you want more than that, if you want more, you should go to MMA. But the best way to do MMA is, like I said, is to shut up about MMA for 6 years and just learn those disciplines for what they are. Because you're going to end up like every other person who's mediocre at jiu-jitsu, mediocre at striking, and mediocre at wrestling, and you're going to be like journeyman at best. Like if the people who have something extra, they have like I don't know, name champions. Name one.
I don't know what they say. Jack of all trades, but a professional at none.
Yeah, there is some nuance in jiu-jitsu. Which isn't the most important discipline for MMA. the people who do have jiu-jitsu have an enormous edge over those who are just like doing MMA jiu-jitsu, for example. So I really think that just being quiet about the whole MMA thing and just learning jiu-jitsu is actually the best way, more than like reorganizing the way that the sport is done. So if you do that rules change, or I say just because takedowns are so important, but then why not just learn how to wrestle? Just go into a wrestling room. Just like.
And Dan got his black belt from Benny Darush. How do you say his name?
Yeah, close enough, man.
Close enough. So do you know him?
I don't.
Oh, he's a pretty well-known UFC fighter right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So he's top ranked. They're consistently in the top 10 in the UFC in a very tough division. He kind of did what I was saying, is like he always knew he wanted to do MMA. He started jiu-jitsu, and then at blue belt he started striking, and then a little thereafter started wrestling. And he took all the domains in their isolation, and didn't just do like wrestling for MMA. He didn't do striking for MMA. He just did Muay Thai at King's MMA with Rafael Cordero. He just did wrestling with some top wrestling guys, Church Boys for a while, and then some other people through that kind of branched out. And jiu-jitsu competitions. You think he was like, I'm not going to play collar and sleeve because like this doesn't cross over to MMA.
Yeah, I notice
there's tons of skills that just how bodies work they carry over.
When people say wrestling for MMA or jiu-jitsu for MMA, often what that actually means is crappy wrestling,
yes.
Crappy
100%.
jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it is. But I'm not a specialist in this area. I'm a specialist in gi jiu-jitsu, gi competitive jiu-jitsu. That is my specialty. So like I'm speaking outside of my area of specialty, though I still think I have an opinion, and you can discard it if you want. Yeah.
No, I think your opinion is very valuable, Dan.
Yeah, but I'm not an MMA guy. Yeah.
I do have one more question about rules, and this.
Just one more. Are we down to our last question?
Okay, this can be the. Well, let's make it the last question. Why not? This isn't my question, but this is.
During training or during filming.
Oh, come on!
This is one that multiple viewers of mine have brought up, and I've been pondering it for a long time, and I still don't know how I feel about it. But it's regarding slamming. Obviously, we don't want to slam people in a jiu-jitsu competition. That would be terrible, even though it's a viable option to win in MMA. But he suggested a rule change awarding some number of points for lifting an opponent up above your head and then safely returning them to the mat.
See, this is people who just want to be doing MMA.
Okay.
Just do MMA if you want to do MMA. They're like, yes. That's, again, I think Americans overall have a difficulty just accepting it for what it is.
Yeah.
That, like, you don't need to sign up. You don't need to do it. And then they sign up and they're kind of bitter that, oh, the guy lifted me up over the head. A lot of times, I'm not saying you're a friend, but you find a sentiment to be quite common. Is that, like, you're trying to make it more of a fight and more fight-like. And there is things that you can do. Just nobody's going to be interested in it because people have spent their
point right there.
People have spent their entire careers learning the jiu-jitsu in the rule set that it generally is, like the IBJJF. Even if you make a different rule set, it's derivatives of IBJJF. It's like going away from home, but not too far, you know? And all the rules that aren't clarified, they just default to IBJJF, all the refs, because they don't train their refs at the smaller organizations. And when something isn't clarified, they just default to IBJJF. So IBJJF is the standard in which you deviate from. You say IBJJF rules, except we're doing this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this.
No, that's such a great point about the people would not be interested.
I would.
I have a friend.
You can make it, and there'd be like 5 people at your tournament. Make it, and you can grow a movement. Just make it. But this honestly is freaking good enough for self-defense reasons. Like, I don't need a rule to say to let go of a triangle if he's picked up over the head. I'm going to underhook your leg as soon as you start to go up, so I don't get rampage.
I know fight to win gives points.
Oh, fight to win for.
But they do. They give points for slams.
I'm sorry if I get the angry messages from
the
people who will send me angry messages.
The thing is, so there are rule sets for people who want to compete under that rule set.
Yeah, there's just nobody's doing it. The level's very low. Because the people who are interested in MMA, they go to MMA.
Yeah, I would not want to compete under that rule set. I just think there's too much chance, for something bad happening.
And there are people that do slams. ADCC is doing slams. Yeah. In my opinion, when you add slams out of submissions in their case, I think the commission needs to get involved. I really do. I think they're going to get into some trouble in this area because slams have the potential for catastrophic brain injury. Catastrophic brain injury. And especially on the mats that they use, which are not, there's no subfloor. It's not two inches of soft mat. It's hard mat. It's barely any like softer than concrete. You slam somebody on the back of their head, people die like this. And
look at all the changes they're making in the NFL.
And I think
as far as those go, because of the the concussion scenarios in all sports, college sports.
And with ADCC in particular, in the past, they've gotten away with it because it's just so small. And the people that have been competing, they're invited. They're the top grapplers of submission grappling, which is not jiu-jitsu. It's not. I always argue, and it's not designed to be. Never was. It's not a jiu-jitsu tournament. It's a submission grappling tournament. It was intended to be what the UFC was for martial arts. This was for grappling. Put all the grappling styles in there. See which one is the best. Just turns out jiu-jitsu was the best, and it's all jiu-jitsu guys going against each other.
What you're going to see with the ADCC is you're correct, 100% correct. That they're only inviting 16 people. And these are the top people in the world. They can defend. They know how to defend a slam for the most part. But now ADCC is having opens. Yeah. They had the ADC Open here in Costa Mesa.
And it's only certain
they had one in Denver. They had one in Mexico. And when you start opening it up to everybody,
and especially because they have deep pockets, they're asking for trouble.
Now you're going to see untrained people really getting hurt.
And once a viral video goes of this, and maybe they're inclined to sue or something because they've had, I didn't sign up for permanent things. Our rule set is designed so you can compete and then you can go to work the next day. That's everything about the rule set is like, we want to go to the point, but not go past the point. And there's no going back on a slam. And as somebody who's had post-concussion syndrome, which effectively ended I didn't have a competitive career, but rolling hard, basically. They don't even know what they're risking. It's just ignorance. It's ignorance. So, with slams, like I said, there's people that allow slams because they do want to keep a little bit more of the realism to it. Just let it go. It's real enough. That's the crazy thing. I just say let it go. We're not real at all. That's what I would say. I'll just accept it. Yep. I'm not doing anything self-defense. I can't defend myself. I'll just give them the argument. Even though I don't really believe that. Just give them the argument. I can't defend myself. It's all good. Even though you're probably better than that person that's criticizing you.
I'm going to start saying that in the YouTube comment section now.
Yeah.
You don't train for the streets.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. But they're a dying breed. And that's kind of what I meant about a little bit of what I meant. There's going to be increasingly two tiers with little middle class. You're going to have people who are competitors. They understand what the high level of this sport is and what it feels like. And there's a lot of people that have never felt a world-class black belt on top of them or on bottom. It doesn't matter. Top, bottom, whatever, any position, name it. And the fact that you feel like a child, the fact that you could do literally zero against them, not even just one escape. You could do zero. You did no good things, not one. You existed in a neutral position for all of 5 seconds. And then you were done. You're getting tapped out every minute, 2 minutes, whatever.
We have a friend named...
But that type of person could do whatever the heck they want with you.
We have a friend named Thiago Barros.
Oh, God.
And he's a little guy,
140
pounds on a good day. Okay. And he gets on top of you, and he feels like he weighs 400 pounds.
Oh, good God. You're doing nothing against him.
And you know what? I mean, and the thing is you saw this guy, and you're like, 140 pounds.
Oh, you don't see Thiago and go,
Well, no, but you know what I'm saying.
You go,
No.
You look at him. The muscle, there's no more muscle that can be fit on somebody his size.
And so, I mean, I trained with him when I went to Brazil. Just super nicest guy in the world. But the thing is when he puts that pressure on you, they have that what is it? The 1 kilo. I can't say it in Portuguese. How they say it? 1,000 pounds. 100 kilos, right? So
A side control.
He may have been the one that invented that. Not the saying, but definitely the feel.
Oh,
because
God, yes.
You know, and that's the kind of thing that, you know, I mean, you don't forget, and that's the kind of thing that
yeah,
he brings to the table.
That's what he's tapping into. Is I'm saying you're gonna be a helpless child against an elite competitor, and you're gonna have those people that understand that, and then the people that are criticizing those people because they don't know how to defend themselves, and they'll be terrible at jiu-jitsu, and that's dangerous because we don't have much of a middle class in this kind of like dichotomy. You're either rich or poor, you made it or you didn't, and we need a little bit more of a middle class. So that's it. But I say, even though I don't believe it, as I just said, you need to give them the argument. All right, you're experts in self-defense. I don't know anything about self-defense. Just give it to them. They'll be happy. They'll be happy. The Valencia brothers down in Miami, they'll be super happy. Just give it to them.
Master Wong, he'll be really happy. Tell Master Wong, everything you're doing.
I'm just playing Monopoly here. That's all I'm doing. We just play Monopoly here.
See, Dan doesn't follow your site. He doesn't understand the whole Master Wong stuff.
I can imagine.
But let me see Thiago go against Master Wong. That's the match I want to see.
You probably don't need a Thiago. You need a competitive blue belt to embarrass him. Like that says more of a statement than anything.
Yeah, I think the most rolling he's ever he did roll for like half a minute with a purple belt once, and it wasn't great. It wasn't great. That's like the only sparring he's ever put up on his channel.
Anyways, enjoy. I hope you guys enjoyed your 20-part interview with Matt and myself.
Yeah, this was awesome. So, Dan, thank you so much for your time. I know you don't grant interviews very often, and and Luke, did I just
Matt?
Dan, I'm messing up names.
That's okay. Happening? Trumpet Dan.
Dan does not offer interviews very often, so I'm very glad we were able to do this today.
Matt wouldn't shut up until I gave him the interview.
And I'm always grateful for the experience. So, yeah. And Dan, I know you don't care about social media and shouting out and everything. And you said the other day, nobody's going to come from across the world to train at Brea Jiu-Jitsu because they saw this podcast. But
maybe not because they saw the podcast, but they do. They come from across the world to train here.
I'm popular everywhere but America.
Especially for Worlds. And I don't know if it's as much that he just doesn't charge anybody anything. So maybe that has something to do with it.
But at the same time, I would just like to add my 2 cents. This is a great place to train. I come here every time I visit Los Angeles. And I learn something every single time. And very grateful for this opportunity. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.